so we can let everybody hear us, and hopefully the audio is good, and I quit looking over at my other screen and start looking at my camera, so it looks like I'm looking at you guys. But this is the first Coffee and Games podcast we've had in months.
Level wherever you want.
And I'm actually kind of a little bit nervous, but I'm sitting with Teapot and Sneb, and this is the first time I've ever had Sneb on the podcast. I'm so excited. It's something it's something I'd been discussing
Your career is
for a
over.
while. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Welcome to meme land.
Everybody's going to see you on the YouTube now and have comments about all of the things that you say here are just going to be like written in history, and nobody's ever going to forget it, and they're going to meme you in the YouTube. It's happened to Teapot. Honestly, it's happened to me. When I was on Tea Time, the one time I was on Tea Time, everybody was like, who is that chick? She doesn't know what she's talking about. Not really, but... So anyways, since it's been such a long time, for anyone who doesn't know...
I'll help you level wherever you want.
Coffee and Games is usually kind of like a podcast where I have a really bad idea and something that I want to talk about and discuss, or something that someone brought up in chat, and I'm like, well, let's get a couple of other creators and do like a water cooler thing. And so it's not supposed to be dramatic. It's not supposed to go into Reddit memes. Sometimes it does, but it's not supposed to. So I'm just excited to get back in touch with everybody now that I'm swapping back to Guild Wars 2 after doing the 14 story for the MSQ. So Sneb, tell us a little bit about yourself. I like to make sure that everybody knows in the beginning. So we do it twice, at the beginning and at the end. So we make sure people get the follows in.
All right. Well, a little bit about me, I guess, personally. I have been playing Guild Wars 2 like forever. I don't know. It's like 15 years now. I played Guild Wars 1 when I was like 11 or 12. I remember going to my friend's house and he was like, I found this new game. It's like RuneScape, but like way better. Oh, yeah? And I remember making a warrior and naming him Slick Blade Point because I thought I was like so cool. I have no idea why I named him that. But anyway... remember running around in the pre-searing, and the rest was history. I begged my parents to buy the game. It was great. I am currently a master's student. I should be graduating at the end of this semester, and also work in sales and do marketing consulting at the side. So that's a little bit about me professionally. So I know at least a little bit about marketing. And
Big LinkedIn fan.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. Yeah, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. It's a good meme. There's context, just forget the context. No context, LinkedIn. Anyway, yeah, I have a guild in Guild Wars 2 that is just dedicated to like helping people form raid statics. Because on NA, there's a big problem with trying to find other people who want to raid, especially if you've never raided before. I'm sure that problem exists on EU, but on NA, it's like 1,000 times worse. So I basically am like Tinder, but for raids in Guild Wars 2. So that's me. We have like a whole spreadsheet. It's really complicated, but yeah, we've helped like well over 100 people kill their first raid boss, get into raids, find groups. It's actually a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And you had actually just talked about recently that you're moving too, which is pretty incredible. Like next week or something?
2 weeks. I was really stressed about this because I was like, I know that I'm going to move in February, and Guild Wars 2 ArenaNet refuses to tell us the release date, right? So I was like, am I going to have my internet hooked up in time? This is like a big concern for me, but thankfully it'll be just in time. So yeah, we're moving in about 2 weeks. So this room you see me in now, it will not be this room going forward. It's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Oh, and you've been doing a lot of events and such for Hardstuck, which is one of the things that I was going to talk about as well. So I saw that you said you were planning something with Guild. I don't know if you can elaborate on that here or if you wanted to wait until everything was set up, but
I can't give you all the details, but I am helping Guild MM with a really cool event that will lead up to EOD, and it's going to be pretty cool. It's going to be really, really cool. I'm really excited. Essentially, I'm going to be like a judge, but I won't reveal too much else. So be prepared. I think that the video is going live on Gildemem's channel in like a few days. So the announcement video for the competition and everything will be then. It's gonna be big.
There's a whole announcement video? God, you guys are so
yeah, there's a video. And let me tell you, this video is god tier. It's really good. Yeah. So I'm pretty excited about that. I've done a bunch of events. We also did an event about, was it like a month ago? Maybe a little bit less, a few weeks ago. And it was basically like Tyria's legendary adventurer or explorer. And we had it so that I would like hide in the map, and then like a whole squad of people would all like run to try to find where I am on the map.
Oh, right.
And
The Where's
it really
Waldo?
tested people. Yeah, it was like where's Waldo, and then we also did trivia in between, and there's a point system, people winning mystic coins. Learned a lot from that event. Probably wouldn't make it quite as complicated as it was, but it was super fun to just see people like zooming around the map trying to find me. And the people that knew the map really well were really impressive.
Yeah.
They were just like, boom, I know where he is. And I would like only reveal like the shade of the rock next to me, and like somehow they would know.
No, it's crazy. Like, especially for like guild events for people that like wouldn't use the wiki for trying to find like certain areas. Or so I'm still really bad with the map, and so I'll be like, oh, where is this one little like fort? And people are like, oh, it's right here, just to the north of this, and you were almost hovered over it. And I'm like, okay, thanks, guys. Like, I'm actually impressed, but that's awesome. I'm super excited.
That's all we have in Guild Wars 2. That's it.
Just the maps.
Yeah, I mean, did you not see all the marketing streams? That they were talking about the detail of the rocks. The player base just reflects that. Look at Sneb. Look at that rock in the Jade Sea. There's no NPCs, but look at that rock. Look at the detail on that rock.
We all need to put like explorer hats on, just like.
But the jade
That'd be
is
such
the
a
wrong
good meme
color.
if like the gem store had like an Indiana Jones like explorer hat for when you go into Cantha and you're just like looking for cool shiny rocks and stuff.
So, Teapot, what have you been up to?
I don't do anything.
No?
I'm nothing. Yeah, less than nothing. I stream Guild Wars 2. There you go. That's it. I talk about things. I try and debate people. And, you know, most importantly of all, I facilitate all of the degenerate, wild memes that spawn in the Guild Wars 2 community, like mushrooms. That's pretty much it. I am the soil. I am the soil in which the mushrooms grow in. I mean, honestly, there's been some crazy developments. You know, over just the past few weeks, these memes, they're out of control. You know, debates are now back, right? You know, Sneb was going at it with everyone. He's going berserk. There's drama. Okay, NA has drama now, all over the place too.
It has drama.
I'm always in the loop. Oh yeah, there's always drama. It's endless. Actually endless. People are always arguing with each other, flaming each other. It's crazy. And that's my purpose. I'm the medium for that.
So
the caretaker.
you're not like one of the
Babysitter.
creators and originators of the Hardstuck Guild for the community, for the guides and the events. You're just the memer? That's it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I do have a guild as well. I do the guild thing. There's an application form. You can go and join the team now. Incredible. Everyone can do that if you want to. Come and do things. Save Guild Wars 2. Be the marketing team. That's one of the things we have. Come and join us. Be the Guild Wars 2 marketing team. Sneb's down with that.
Essentially, if you join Heartstuck, you become like Batman, but for Guild Wars 2. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much it.
You gotta work on your voice then. You gotta make it gruff and like the Christopher Nolan Batman.
See, Teapot does that every day, though. Like,
I know.
No problem.
he exercises his voice to the point of like no return. I think one day Teapot will just show up and he'll sound like he's been smoking for like 70 years, but it'll just be permanent at that point.
That's happened on one of my podcasts.
Yeah.
It was like for the first 2 hours. I don't know why it was longer
tough.
than 2 hours, but yeah. And you're like, don't worry,
does
it'll be
happen.
better afterwards. And I'm like, are you sure? Are you sick? No, you just did like
after
a,
the,
9 or 10 hour stream the day before. And I was like, okay.
Yeah. After the stream, my voice, it's gone. It doesn't exist. But yeah, I'm going to do some tournaments at some point after Ender Dragons, hopefully. There'll be events. There will be the website. There will be Hardstuck. There will be Discords. There'll be everything.
Speaking of
I'm trying to get it, bring it together.
the memes and the drama, I've noticed, I feel like a couple of times where I've just been like hanging out in your chat. It seems like you're always yelling at people recently.
Yes.
Like at your chat.
Usually me.
Why is
Usually
that?
yelling at me.
Before the stream started here, we were talking about how, you know, Snebble trying to educate people and you'll just yell at people. Well, I'll yell at people. I will yell at people and try and convince them that I'm right at the same time. I'm getting both at the same time. That's why.
That's a good way to do it.
Ultimately, you know what? I think online discourse is terrible. I think it's really bad. And there's one thing that annoys me more than anything else. Okay, it's complaining about things, but for a really bad reason. And when people complain about things for a bad reason, it makes me very angry, and I have to correct them and tell them why they should be complaining about it for the right reason, not for a bad reason.
I wasn't expecting.
And people
that
should also
answer.
engage in good faith. Yeah. Oh no, it's true. Yeah. Like people don't really understand like actual reasons. Like for example, like balance, right? People always complain about balance in Guild Wars 2, but they don't actually understand balance. And I think it's really important to actually understand what's going on there, because otherwise you're going to end up giving really, really bad feedback. That would just be an example of it. You know, people will complain. They'll say, "Oh, the reason why Tempest doesn't see play in raids is because it doesn't have spirits." This is inaccurate. That is not really the case. Why? Like, people don't play Tempest in raids because they massively overvalue offensive support, and they don't care about defensive support. That's an example of that. And people say, "Oh, you should just give offensive buffs to Tempest." The problem is, if they did that, it would make Druid like completely pointless if you did that, because the whole idea is that Druid is a much more offensive support, whereas Tempest is a defensive support, and those two things are actually balanced as they are right now. It's arguably favored towards Tempest, and no, whatever. All the Ellie mains start crying. Then I have Thief mains from PvP saying, "Yeah, Thief does no damage. Thief is bad. Thief is terrible." Meanwhile, Thief is easily, by far, the most dominant build in PvP right now. Easily, not even close. Not even a tiny bit close. It's easily the best build. And you know that kind of stuff, it's got to be dealt with. You know, you got to shut that down.
I love how I started this and I'm like, there's not going to be any drama. That's not the way I do podcasts. We're not going to talk about it. And then I immediately am like, so why have you been yelling in your streams recently?
Yeah.
And it goes off into all of the builds. So I know a while ago, and it's not really necessarily super pertinent, but I just kind of wanted to give an example of contrast since we were talking about chat. So Sneb, have you ever streamed any other game than Guild Wars 2?
I mean, define streamed any other game. Like
streamed any other game. Like, did you sit down and play a game that you streamed and it wasn't Guild Wars 2?
I have streamed Guild Wars 1. I have streamed RuneScape.
I have
RuneScape.
Streamed there you go.
Warcraft 3 before. I've streamed some scary games, and I think I've streamed StarCraft before, but I mean, have I really streamed them? Like once in a blue moon. Like I've probably done them each like one time, right? Like I mostly stream Guild Wars 2. This is my game. This is my home. I love this game, right? That's why I play it.
Exactly.
I don't know. Like
sure.
Yeah. I don't really do anything else. I'm kind of a one-trick pony. I just like the game like I like the stock, you know? Like
But the idea that you have created content for something else, even if it was just for one day or a meme, will work for the next question. So that was all I needed. So Teapot, I know you went through when New World came out, when it released, you were kind of streaming that as well. Have you guys noticed a difference, or was it just the same community between like your chat in Guild Wars 2 and playing those other games? Just specifically on topic of like yelling at chat and talking about builds and whatnot, like did you notice a major difference when you were streaming other games in your chat?
It's what exactly do you mean by that?
So
Can you be more specific?
Sure. So for example, when I was streaming Final Fantasy XIV, I was going through the full MSQ, which took me about a month because I was doing some extra things as well. And for me, it was like for face value, like my chat in Guild Wars 2 would talk more about like maps or builds, because builds are something that's really, really, really important in Guild Wars 2, and it's something that Guild Wars 2 has kind of mastered with having the builds, the traits, swapping weapons for different abilities that other MMOs don't necessarily have. But for 14, because everything is so geared towards story, it would be more of my chat only wanted to be there to see me do the story once, and then like people wouldn't come out for, you know, you doing a raid for the first time or whatever. They only wanted to see story, whereas Guild Wars 2 is different. So I didn't know if you noticed that playing New World? Like, was there something that your chat talked about specifically that was different from Guild Wars 2 because of the features in the game? Or did they act a different way? Or did you just have your same community?
The big thing is that they notice how inconvenient other games are compared to Guild Wars 2.
I've noticed that
specifically movement. Like New World is a game that is a walking simulator deliberately, and so is the other game I played. I played World of Warcraft Classic. That is like it's funnily enough, I actually don't know which one is more of a walking sim. I would actually go as far to say it might actually have been New World being more of a walking sim than WoW Classic, because New World has a really big world, and so does Classic WoW. But the difference is that New World doesn't have anything in it. Yeah, which is rough, very rough for New World there. So that will be the big thing, I would say, is movement and like the downtime. Like Guild Wars 2 is a zero downtime game. Like you're never not doing anything, or rather, you have the option to never not be doing anything. If you want to chill, you can chill, right? But if you don't want to, you can be 100% like every single second of your game time in Guild Wars 2 is action, right? Queuing PvP, boom, I'm in World vs. World. Now, ooh, we're in the raid LFG, okay? Well, maybe on NA that's not so good, then you're going to be waiting for a while. But like, open world boss, let's go do that, farm this, do this. That's really, that's something that you really notice as a contrast between Guild Wars 2 and other games. I would say, I think there are, more modern games that have kind of the auto LFG system aren't quite like this anymore. You can kind of get a lot of action going there. There's a lot of auto group finding. But I would definitely say that some of the more old school MMOs, and honestly even the more modern stuff, in just the way the open world plays out and the way the general flow of the game is, it's a lot slower paced than Guild Wars 2 overall. Whereas Guild Wars 2, you have unlimited speed. And the chat definitely referred to that. They were like, dude, you've got to walk all the way there now. You've got to walk like 10 minutes to get to the objective. Right, enjoy, buddy.
I don't mind the walking or the exploration. I'm weird. Like, I have all of, like, my mounts and everything unlocked. And the glider, I will say, absolutely just, like, specifically on movement, since we were talking about that, best movement I've ever felt in a game. Like, not even just, like, being able to dodge or have the active combat and move, but being able to use the glider feels so good. Mounts, on the other hand, I'm not super great with because they actually feel different in Guild Wars 2 than they do in other games. Because they're not an extension of you, it's an actual mount, so it's not just to go faster. Like, they actually feel different. They're harder to turn. They have abilities, but movement for gliding is absolutely incredible. But did you notice any differences, Sneb, when you streamed other games between, like, your chat, possibly the way that they acted or things that they were interested in? It was a question I had yesterday, which is why I was like,
I think this is a very good question, because it's very multifaceted here. I mean, yes, I'm going to, obviously, right? I think that if I go and I stream another game, the conversation is very comparative. Like, people want me to be like, how is this better or worse than Guild Wars 2? Like, the whole time, right? So that the sentiment changes a little bit. Whenever you stream Guild Wars 2, it feels like the demographic that's really involved in Twitch, and this isn't for everybody, obviously, but it feels like a large portion of the demographic that watches Twitch is there because they want you to be hypercritical about the game. They want you to be like a little bit edgy about it because they're like mad about something, right? They're like, oh, sure, but like, isn't the LFG just so bad? Or like, they want you to like go off about it. And I even noticed that if I have those like those streams where I'm just like pissed off about something and I just like go off about like some feature that I think needs fixed and like how I would fix it, like the chat just lights up. Like people for some reason in Guild Wars 2, everybody just wants there to be a problem, right? Because there are lots of like little things that can be critiqued. So when they're in a Guild Wars 2 stream, it feels like that's kind of their thing. But when I go to other streams, like if I go watch some RuneScape streamer, it doesn't feel like it's about that as much. Like, not, at least not with the same level of consistency as Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 players want to be angry about something. But in like RuneScape, they just take that out on the Reddit or something and they like meme about it. And then they're like, it's like the content on the stream, right? They're like, oh, this guy's like doing this challenge, or he's like fighting this boss or going for this record or like whatever. And so it's less about like crapping over the game and more about like the content. I don't know if anyone else finds that, or it's just me, or maybe I'm too engrossed in the Guild Wars 2 community, and that's just what I notice.
I think for me, it just like it's not necessarily with Guild Wars 2, because I've had a lot of people in my chat just be like, "Oh, hey, you're hanging out and exploring the world," and I'll be like, "Yeah," and they'll be like, "What do you think about this?" And I'll be like, "It's good." I did have a couple of people when I started playing say that I was too fresh, that I was like a 1st of May, and that I was too positive about everything. So I did have that when I first started playing. Like, whenever I would talk about the game, I would be like really bubbly and stuff, and people would be like, "Wow, she definitely hasn't played the game for long enough because she doesn't see all the issues." And it wasn't that I didn't see any issues, it was just that I guess at the time they didn't really matter to me. Which, and I do think it's great to bring these things up, especially like for devs and such, and so that these things can be fixed. But I'd say most importantly for my chat, it's either builds or exploration. Like, I've had a lot of people come in recently and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm 100%ing the map." And they're like, "Oh, you're not doing like challenge mode raids?" I'm like, "No, I'm 100%ing the map." Yeah. And they're like, "Okay, well, can I join you?" Yeah. So I feel like it's more of that. I think, I mean, I think that mostly what you said is more of an internet thing too, kind of like how we were talking about earlier. But like, people are just always angry because of the anonymity, honestly, is how I feel about it. I don't know, Teapot, how do you feel about it?
This is really leaning into part of the main topic. I think it is linked to the community sentiment, but I do think it is a very general thing. Mm-hmm. I think when you're dealing with stuff that has a very high time investment, and I would say that specifically you're talking about MMORPGs, MOBA games. You see it a lot, in my opinion, with League of Legends and Dota 2. But I would say this is any game that you sink a lot of hours into, experiences this. When people drift away from the game, they need to justify. This is going to sound like a really, really almost like borderline cult thing to say, but I really think this is true. When people leave the game, it's not enough that they don't like the game anymore. They need the game to be bad, right? Because that will justify their dislike of the game and the fact that they can't enjoy the game anymore. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people who do this find it really hard to fully detach away from the game. So they kind of really need to validate their own belief. Yeah, the game's terrible, horrible game, ArenaNet, worst company ever, seriously worse than Pong, probably developed by ants, right? Okay, not good, very bad. And they'll come to Guild Wars 2 streams just to jerk themselves off. You see this with WoW as well. I think that right now there's a massive anti-WoW circle jerk. Mm-hmm. Some people are like, well, actually, I'm kind of enjoying Shadowlands. No, how dare you enjoy Shadowlands, you evil fuck, right? Okay, like that's basically what's going on. And I think that that's kind of like what's happening there with Guild Wars 2. I think Guild Wars 2 maybe has disproportionately bad sentiment in the community, which is why you're probably going to experience this more than other things, more than other games, perhaps. But I don't think it's necessarily unique. I think it's just a side effect of people being unable to detach themselves from something that they've sunk a huge amount of hours into, and they need to validate their choice in doing so. And that's the way that kind of emotionally bubbles to the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
I just want to touch on that because sure. This is something that I've thought a lot about. My graduate degree is in consumer behavior. Ooh. And there was a paper I read for a class one time that now I'm forgetting the author's name, but essentially it was about identity and possessions and how we ascribe, or like how we basically the items that we hold are just they're representations of self, and that we put a lot of our identity in the things that we own. And as I read that paper, I remember thinking that is exactly why people get really angry when their MMO is dying or failing or doing something that they don't agree with, right? I'm not saying Guild Wars 2 is dying or failing. I'm just saying that when those people...
You heard it, guys.
Yeah, no. When people experience anything that goes against what they think that they like the game direction should go on. So if you're like really love dungeons, well, they haven't added a new dungeon in like 5 years, right? So you're gonna be pissed because it's like an attack on your identity, you know? And I think that's really interesting because what Teapot's saying is essentially that it's not enough, and the reason that it's not enough is because they've sunk all of this time and that so much of who they are and like they've just put so much of themselves in this character, in this game. They have memories, they have relationships, that if the game is veering in a direction that they don't agree with, it's a major attack on self, and that they lash out as a result. And I think that part is just so fascinating, but also quite sad, right? Because a loss of identity is nothing to just like wag a finger at. Like it's like a big deal. Maybe I'm making it over dramatic, but the reality is you have people that have spent 30,000 hours in Tyria, and if suddenly Tyria becomes like a swamp, they don't like it, well, that really sucks, right? Like that sucks for them, and that's something that's hard to like get over for them, I suppose.
No, I completely understand. It's sad. It's definitely sad, but I totally get where you're coming from. I actually have a couple of questions that stem from that too. So, which one is probably going to get me flamed pretty hard, but it's okay. So one of the things that I was talking to my husband about, speaking of which, having certain changes to the game, is I feel like there are a lot of people recently, because of hearing about End of Dragons, or like a little bit of promotion or whatever, or having downtime in the game that they're playing. Like I was talking about with 14, it's like, okay, you're done with the main story quest, which is their main big thing. It's their main big piece of content. And so if you're not like raiding Savage, which is their highest tier until Ultimate comes out, you know, you can like explore or farm things, get some glamour, but for the most part it's the story. So people take a break and they'll play something else. And so recently we saw quite a few people that had come over to Guild Wars 2 that were just trying it out. And they didn't necessarily stick around for one point or another. Nobody really said why. Like they had other games that came out, you know, like raids for TBC, or really excited about, you know, getting ready for Lost Ark or Elden Ring, and people got to like be in the alphas and betas for that. And these people had come from games like Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft. And for me, I think that a couple of them might have stopped playing the game not only to play these other games and take a different route and wait for their main game to be ready, but also because they didn't have the leveling experience after 80 that is the same leveling experience they're used to for a new expansion. Like a new expansion comes out, you get another 5 levels or 10 levels. It's that horizontal progression, even though you have masteries, which is a different take on leveling. So I was talking to my husband and I was like, what if for some reason ArenaNet added 5 more levels for End of Dragons? They're not going to, obviously, but what if they did? How do you think people would respond? And would you guys like it if they did, depending on the way it was implemented?
If they added levels?
Yep, like 5 more levels. Like you had to get to 85 before you could still explore and do all of the content for End of Dragons. You could explore all of the maps in Cantha, but you were locked from, let's say, the new strikes or whatever until you were 85. How do you think the community itself would respond? But also, how would you feel about it? And what do you think people coming over from World of Warcraft and 14 might think? Would they stick around?
I just don't know what the purpose of that would be. I can't see a reason. The levels mean almost nothing in Guild Wars 2.
Exactly.
Right? Like
for us, yes.
So you add 5 levels. What have you accomplished, right? Like I have 3,000 tomes of knowledge. I just click a couple buttons. Every character I have is level 85 now, and it's sort of meaningless to me. So it's kind of hard for me to imagine that, right? I think other people coming from other games, it's just not the same experience at all, right? It's very easy to level, and I mean, to acknowledge my own bias, I haven't played a lot of Final Fantasy or World of Warcraft, so I don't have a good, I suppose, gauge for this. But Guild Wars 2 you level in like a million ways. You kill a creature, you explore a point, you make a sword, like whatever, right? You gather some things. You're getting experience all the time. You're just being handed experience. You have a million boosters that are easy to get and basically free as well. So I think that people coming from other games already have this notion that it just seems, it's like, wow, everything is a benefit. I don't know that sentiment would really change very much. I don't know that somebody coming from WoW or Final Fantasy would be like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I want. I think that just the leveling system is just so completely different that it wouldn't make any impact if you just add 5 more levels. And for the players that are the players that have always played the game, I think they would just be like, huh? Like, why I'm just gonna press a few buttons and level up now.
Right. Well, just for like anyone that hasn't played another game, I don't even know if it's necessarily something that's needed, but for like WoW and 14, just to have that level bar, I think it's like a subconscious type thing. Like it gets you to actually play more of the game because you're getting experience for it. So it's like, why am I doing this? Well, I'll get experience to get to max level, and then I'll get the new gear, and then I'll be able to raid. So, and I feel like...
I think what you just said is a really important note, though. I don't think it's necessarily the level. I think it's the gear, right? The level is like a cool dopamine hit, whatever, but I actually think it's more the gear, and that's why I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this, because what you're suggesting would imply that Guild Wars 2 must change their gear system, I think. Otherwise, the leveling system is pointless, right? There'd have to be like some kind of requirement for new gear. So it'd have to be like, okay, well, if you have Legendary, that's automatically up to 85. But if you have Ascended, well, now there's Mega Ascended, and it adds 2% more
Super
stats.
Ascended.
And I think people would lose their minds because that's so against the philosophy of the game currently.
Right.
I think that would be really difficult, but that's the only way I could envision leveling really like having value. Otherwise, the mastery system, like you suggested, is the leveling system. Right. Even though I don't even really do it. It's weird,
isn't it? Because people will play Guild Wars 2 and they'll say, "Well, once you get to a certain point, what do you do?" And it's like, well, you can, level your mastery. Is you could do Living World, you could get achievements, you could PvP, you could World v World. Like, there's so many things that you could do, and people are like, but what do you do? Because they're not like leveling more to get to that portion of the story. They're not getting new gear to get to these new raids. That's kind of what I was saying. So like, what if they added more of that? Yeah, so gear as well, but you know what I mean?
Like, here's what you do. You make
masteries
matter, right? You make them like, I say that with some kindness, but masteries to me mean almost nothing, right? They're just like, I don't know. For me, it's because I just play a lot of end game stuff, and so there's like 3 masteries or something for raids, and you can actually do all the raids without them anyway. So I think the masteries would have to be a little bit more potent, and I don't really have a good solution to that. At the same time, because I think there's a lot of problems with what I just said too. I almost want to take it back.
I think it's cute because I'm like.
Because if you make them, they're already really strong, but they're just, it's like a weird way to progress. I
understand. That's why
like the laser beam thing. If you get people to use the laser beam thing in open world, it will like quadruple their DPS normally, right? Like and I know this because I've done it. If you just spam. Don't forget to hit your special action key. Your squad DPS will at least double. It's wild. Right. And it's because most people don't pay much attention to their stats because it's not super relevant in the game. So in a way, the mastery system is already making people way more powerful. But I don't know if it's the way that I really like. It's hard to wrap your mind around
it, though, because of not playing other MMOs, right? So it's not like, and for people in chat, like, yes, I can see what you're saying. I'm not suggesting that there should be 5 more levels, and I'm not saying that that's the reason why people aren't continuing to play the game. I'm just saying, like, is that big of a difference? What is getting people, like, making it so that people aren't interested in continuing on after they hit 80? That's what I'm saying. Like, let's brainstorm what it could be, because it's leading into my next question. But anyway, Teapot, you look like you really want to yell at us.
I think that this conversation is weird because it's true, but it in a way it doesn't matter. I mean,
exactly.
Vertical progression is something that does actually anchor a lot of people. People are so used to this concept that a game without it is going to seem pointless to a lot of people, or they won't understand it very well. But I don't think that means that Guild Wars 2 should conform. And in fact, I feel the opposite. Guild Wars 2 is different. I would be so extreme on this that I would say stuff like masteries are actually a bad idea. I think that Arena actually buckled on this back in the day. Because when the original Guild Wars 2 came out, as in the vanilla, there was just exotic gear. Ascended didn't exist, and people were like, "Wait, what the hell is this? What do you do in this game?" Because you could get exotic gear within like immediately once you got max level, right? You're already best. You're best in slot like day one, or day one of being level 80. And this really confused people. And ArenaNet were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And they actually buckled with this and added Descended. And that massively slowed people down. And they added Fractals too, which had this inbuilt progression system in it with the fractal level as well. And in some ways, this was actually a mistake. Because it wasn't necessary. People just didn't understand the game. Maybe it was impossible to do. I don't blame them for doing it, to be honest. Like, to be clear, in fact, the game may have even suffered a lot by not having vertical progression. And I would even say that it's possible that Guild Wars 2 would be more popular today if it did have vertical progression. But that doesn't mean it would be a better game, and it doesn't mean that I would like it more. I'm just saying it might well be more popular. No, I think that a lot of these systems are kind of scuffed progression and end up making the game causing the game a lot of problems. I think the masteries that Sneb was talking about are the exact thing that demonstrates that. Like, vertical progression and kind of power creep has happened a lot in the game, and some of that has been down to masteries. I would actually say that mounts massively obliterate the exploration process in open world. They're honestly some of the most overpowered things in the entire game. At the start of the game, you'd have to jump and look for paths and be careful about where you move. Now you can use fly hack with a sky scale to get everywhere. Again, I'm not saying this is bad. I'm saying that this is true, and this has changed the way you approach the game. You can break any Defiance bar using the Icebridge Saga Mastery with the way station thing, right? We're just hitting an action key, boom, instantly break the break bar. Stuff like Bone Skinner in strike missions dies in 17 seconds because of how overpowered the laser beam is. Mm-hmm. Like, all of these things are, in my opinion, actually bad for the game. Right? Or rather, they damage the game's integrity. Like, mounts add a load of other really good things. Like, for example, I think that the fact that the Beetle and the Griffin exist is pretty remarkable, actually. Like, you basically have like two very well developed, almost like little mini games, right, within the system. But alongside this stuff, you do end up with a lot of feature creep and a lot of power creep that end up causing a lot of problems. And the problem with masteries, they're either going to be ridiculously overpowered or totally niche and totally useless. A really good example of this would be stuff like some of the Icebridge Saga, once again, like the Raven stuff, like the Raven masteries. You use this on exactly one map, right? Or only two maps. Mm. And it doesn't do anything anywhere else. And this is true of a lot of masteries, because the thing is, if it wasn't, you'd be covered in all these like weird gimmicks that you have to interact with all the time, and it would basically make future content really inaccessible, because you wouldn't be able to access all of it unless you go back, do the old masteries, and then you can come back and do the new stuff there with those old masteries. Like, these type of systems, I understand why they're added to the game, but I think they're kind of a band-aid. Right? What needs to happen is that people who play Guild Wars 2 need to realize that Guild Wars 2 is different, and that's okay, right? You don't want every MMO to be the same. I don't want to be playing World of Warcraft clones. I want to play something that's different. Right. I like World of Warcraft, but I also like Guild Wars 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I honestly think that's the best way to put it. And it was just something that I thought was kind of fun that my husband and I were talking about, and I was like, I don't know if that would make a difference. Would people be angry? Would other people, stay? Why did they leave? And I'm actually hoping, where it's kind of like how you were talking about people not playing a game anymore and having to justify not playing that game. There are some people that were specifically content creators who are quite bigger, or I like to call them B-level creators, that... that don't necessarily have to justify it. They have a really good community and they can play whatever game they want that they're really interested in. But I almost because I had all of these people on my stream, Stay Safe, Luxtos, and quite a few others. And I would love to actually get them back and be like, so can I just play... Guild Wars 2 promotional person here. Let me just be part of the customer service. Why did you stop playing? At what point were you like, okay, this isn't the game for me? You know what I mean? Get some feedback and then give it to them. And so one of the things I was thinking about is because they came from games that, you get those levels and you have that experience. And I don't know what it is about it, because I've even found myself coming from World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV, when I was working on Living World, or actually going through Path of Fire was the big one, where I was so invested in the story that I literally pushed the story and didn't explore and didn't do like as much outside of anything unless I had to. And I felt bad about that, which is why I'm going and doing all of the exploration now, because it really is amazing. And now I'm looking at it in fresh eyes, and I'm actually doing the map completion as I'm doing story on a different character. But my husband was like, so why did you just bum rush the story, and why didn't you do everything else? And I was like, I don't know. Maybe it's because getting to 80 in the core story, I was leveling from doing it, because you could get experience from everything. And maybe it's because you weren't really leveling anymore except your masteries. And specifically in Path of Fire, I thought the maps were cool, but I didn't necessarily, like we were talking about, think the masteries were a very valid way of like getting those abilities or making your mounts better. So I was, I don't know. And he goes, but why do you care about that? And I'm like, I don't know. That's the weird part. Like, I don't know why leveling is, but it is. And I absolutely love Guild Wars 2. And now that I've done the story for 14, I'm back to Guild Wars 2, and I'm literally not playing anything else again, but I'm doing more exploration instead of bum rushing the story. But that was kind of my thing too, is I was like, I don't know, maybe it's because there weren't levels. And he's like, why? I don't know. But at any rate, one of the other things that I wanted to ask you guys, speaking about how the community feels about the game, with changes and things that are coming up, how do you guys feel about having a release date for the release date? And how do you guys think how do you feel, and how do you think the community feels about how late this is? Let's not be super touchy about it, because, stuff and things, but...
I want to hear what Teapot has to say.
Arena, goodness me. I mean, the thing is, I don't know why anyone pretended to be surprised about this. I'm a veteran, okay? I'm an old man in the Guild Wars 2 scene. I saw this one coming a mile off. ArenaNet, they are borderline troll when it comes to announcing things. They kind of did this with Path of Fire as well. They were like, oh yeah, there's an expansion, by the way. Like, go, play, do, In fact, like the biggest marketing that you got for Path of Fire was like the entire expansion got leaked. Other than that, it was like radio silence pretty much up until like the month before the thing. Yeah, this doesn't surprise me whatsoever. I think that it's even more extreme this time because they're obviously under a bit of a time pressure. They're rushing a little bit with Ender Dragons. They already delayed the expansion from the end of 2021 to February 2022. So things are obviously a little bit frantic over there. So it's taking a while. I mean, I don't think it's good. I think it sucks. I think it sucks we don't know the date. Why don't we know the release date? I don't know. I think they're going to try and do something, hopefully a little spectacular this Tuesday. Should be something, that's been alluded to a little bit that, oh yeah, it's going to be a big thing. Hype. Let's go. Get everyone excited about the expansion. But yeah, this is business as usual. This is Anet. This is welcome to Anet. Anet, they don't like marketing, right? They don't like selling people about their game. They're trying to make sure that their servers are nice and relaxed and not worrying about too many things.
I'm pretty concerned here. So take this with a grain of salt. But
I could see it on your face. You're waiting for Teapot to be done, and you're like, all right.
Yeah. My issue with this, and I'd be very curious if we took like a survey, is we've been waiting a long time, and the drip of content has been a little bit sparse, and the content that they've showed hasn't really appealed to a player like me so far. Right?
Why?
Don't get me wrong.
No,
Why?
I'm not.
Well, they haven't showed any gameplay.
Okay.
So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think fishing is a cool feature, and I think a lot of people will really enjoy that. And I'll play it. Like, I think it'll be fun for a while. I think that the maps and going back to Kantha is really exciting because I'm a huge fan of Guild Wars factions. I've got a sealed collector's edition behind me. I love the game, right? Obviously, I love Kantha. It was one of my favorite places to go. But they just haven't really shown me anything that's got me like, this is something that I can play over and over and over again, something that I'll enjoy for a long time. And that has me slightly concerned. And then the cadence at which they've dripped this content is a little odd to me. There have been times where it feels like this, and I acknowledging my bias here, it feels this way, like it's been like 2 months and then they give you something else. And it's just like a little breadcrumb. And it's been going on for so long, and we haven't had any aspirational content of any kind for so long that I'm just kind of tired. Like I don't know if other Guild Wars 2 players feel like this, but I'm just kind of like, I feel like I've ran a marathon. I'm at the end of the race. I'm like, you're finally really gonna release this thing, but we don't even have a release date. It's just like another thing, right? The release date for the release date is just kind of like, really? Like we've been so patient, and you're gonna give us a release date that's so troll. Like this, I find myself not incredibly hyped right now because I just feel kind of exhausted by having waited so long and not really had anything to, I suppose, get me super hyped or that appeals to a player like me. Now, I imagine there are certainly people who are like, fishing is the best ad ever. And to them, they might be super hyped. So I'm really just speaking from my perspective as somebody who really enjoys gameplay, raids, fractals, those same things. I find myself, like yesterday on stream, I just kind of sat there for a moment and I was like, just kind of tired. Like, I don't even really feel like gaming too much right now. I just feel like I'm waiting for the expansion, but I don't really know what I'm waiting for. There's an announcement of an announcement, and I was just kind of like, I was kind of numb to it, I suppose, which is certainly not the way that I want to feel, because again, like there are parts of this that I'm super excited for, but I just find myself going, just like a little tired. I don't know.
I mean, I get where you're coming from. And it's funny for me when people talk about like that big lapse in content, because they're technically like caught up isn't the right term, but caught up. Because they've, done the full story. They've actually done like all of the raids, or they've done all of the strikes that were available and whatnot. And they've done map completion and 100%ed things for, getting their whatever. And they've gotten sky scale and they've created a legendary. And so people are like, I don't really know what I'm excited for. And I feel like I'm the only one that's over here going, well, I'm excited because I haven't even finished the story to get there yet. I don't even know if it connects, but I'm excited because it'll be more content. And I haven't even finished the content that I'm doing, which, I mean, is more of like a thing for myself where I'm still fresh into the game and I haven't done anything. Like, I've done some end game stuff, but I'm actually going back, and like I said, for myself, I wanted to 100% map completion, talk to all of the NPCs as I do the story because it'll mean more, get back to where I was, which is Living World Season 4, and then go from there and actually explore and get into the story. So for me, there's so much still left to do that it's hard for me. I understand other people having done all of these things already and having a content drought for what, like 5 years since Path of Fire came out, and what, at least a year or two since they added, Sunquo Peak. But for me, it's like I can't even comprehend or understand that because I have so much left in front of me. So for me, it's all hype, but I understand why people wouldn't be as excited. And speaking of, someone in chat had mentioned they were just like, Cantha came out of nowhere. And I've actually heard that a lot, that people are like, yeah, it's great that we're going to Cantha. It'll be cool. It'll be really nice to like reminisce and have that nostalgia. But how do you guys feel about that? Like, do you feel like it came out of nowhere? Do you feel like it actually really connects to the story at all, other than End of Dragons? Or like, what do you guys think?
I think this is actually one of the biggest criticisms I would level at Arena. I think this is one that people are sleeping on a little bit, but it's definitely true. We know nothing about how the story actually connects with the current story. I mean, to be fair, the Icebrood saga was a bit scuffed in this regard. It was probably a little rushed, and there wasn't really a time to properly wrap it up and kind of do a little epilogue and join it onto the next section of the story. But yeah, it is totally random. I mean, if I was feeling cynical, I would say it's definitely a Hail Mary. It's like, okay, right, things are going horribly for us. We had to completely destroy Primordus and Jormag in one go. Spoiler alert, by the way. Doesn't matter, right? We're just going to make everyone happy and forget that ever happened with Cantha now. Hooray! We're so full of joy and happiness. Like, look how good this is. I think that's definitely how it feels. I think a lot of people perceive it that way. But this is a slight tangent, but I think it really gets to the root of the issue. In some ways, the reason why people aren't hyped isn't because they aren't going to enjoy the game or they're worried they won't enjoy the game. It kind of goes back to one of the first things we talked about, is that people have a really big investment in the game and they want it to do well. And when people see ArenaNet not dropping the release date, not dropping any kind of like big hyper promotional material, not really kind of getting everyone high energy and ready to go and getting the word out there as much as they would like. I think that feels like their game is under threat, right? Like the future of Guild Wars 2, I think it feels very uncertain to a lot of people. There's been a lot of, tempestuous, rough times in the Guild Wars 2 development cycle. And the fact that people kind of see, people are a bit lukewarm about it. People aren't talking about it. Oh, there's Lost Ark, Elden Ring, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy. And it makes people a little uneasy. It makes them a bit rustled, and quite rightly so, to be honest. It is a little bit concerning to see some of these things not really be addressed. And, there's an expansion coming out next month. No one knows about it, but yeah, it's coming out. Like, you go play it. Maybe everyone will change their mind on Tuesday with the biggest marketing bomb of all time for any video game ever. But yeah, I think that's a big part of why people are really worried is again, because they feel like the future of the game is uncertain, and the uncertainty is what really bothers people.
So, yeah, it's a little odd, right? Like, look, I'm a massive fan of this franchise. I want to take some time off work to play the game, even if it's one day. And we're probably less than a month out, and we don't have the date. But they say that the date is in February. And there's a lot of people in that situation, right? They just love the game. They basically make it an event when the game has a new expansion, and they want to take some time off and like enjoy the game and like in a sense like be a kid again, right? Mm-hmm. But not giving us that with enough time means that some people can't take the time off. And so of course that feels under threat. You're like, man, are they not telling us this because they're going to delay it? Or are they not? So people start to get like really worried. It's about controlling the community sentiment. And you absolutely can't blame people for being like, oh my gosh, they're going to delay it when you don't have a release date and it's this close. It just feels that way. People are going to start jumping to the conclusions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you don't set the narrative, then people will do it for you. This is something that I think ArenaNet doesn't do very well. Because even though stuff like the subreddit and even stuff like Twitch and YouTube, this is a pretty small segment of the player base. ArenaNet kind of let everyone just run wild. They won't say, right, this is how it is, deal with it. They'll say, oh yeah, just wait and see. And they just allow people to just say whatever they want pretty much, which, hey, I appreciate it. I like saying what I want. But on the other hand, I think that it does end up with some pretty negative consequences. For example, I would say that if you're a new player and you go, oh, I'm going to go check out r/Guild Wars 2, right, you're going to get a pretty interesting idea of like you might go, is this game really looking so hot? Maybe not. If you do go check out some of these spaces and kind of listen to what people are saying, I think you'll find that the community, like the vocal community sentiment, is far more negative than it really should be.
Which is horrible for the game.
And I think a big part of that is because ArenaNet don't engage with the really engaged players, right? They just kind of let them to mill around, getting worried that it's going to be delayed. That's a very, very common thing right now. It's like, oh yeah, they're delaying the expansion. Fortunately, they did say, hey, there's a release date for the release date now, right? Which kind of shut that down a little bit, maybe. But it was a really big concern for a long time because we just heard nothing. It was total radio silence. Now, I do actually want to devil's advocate here a little bit, and it's not even devil's advocate because I do actually feel this way. So it's only half a devil. I don't entirely blame ArenaNet for this.
Evils.
I don't entirely blame ArenaNet for the way this is going because I actually think in a lot of ways it doesn't matter what they do. I think people are always going to be very stressed about the game, and they're always going to doubt ArenaNet. And the reason for that is very, very simple. History.
PR.
Okay. Prefacing this, okay, disclaimer. I actually really like Guild Wars 2 a lot.
No.
I'm a big Guild Wars 2 fan.
What?
And actually, I think the devs are great. I've personally interacted with a lot of them. I think they're really talented, hardworking, passionate people. So when I say this, it comes from a place of love. But Guild Wars 2 has disappointed players consistently for, I would say, close to 5 years now. And that is a hard thing to overcome. Very hard to overcome. If it's the amount of content, if it's platitudes like, oh, we're restructuring, I'm going to get our content out quicker. If it's copy-pasted stuff that just doesn't feel very finished or very well done. Ice Brood Saga, right? Like PvP and WoWs are being left to rot, right? Blah, blah, blah. Raids, fractal strikes, dungeons, whatever. We can go back years and years and years and years and years, right? But in a way, no matter what Anet does, one event can't fix that. And I think that a lot of ArenaNet's approach around End of Dragons reflects that they understand this. Just dropping an X-Pack, it's not going to make people have trust and have confidence in ArenaNet again. Rebuilding the trust that has been obliterated over the years is going to take them years to do. And in that respect, I have a level of sympathy with ArenaNet for not really sweating this stuff too much and really focusing on End of Dragons and the years after that, because it's time to rebuild. It's time to actually get the community back on side again. And to be honest, I don't think words will do that. Like, I think even if ArenaNet was communicating a lot more, probably wouldn't actually help that much, because anything that they would say, people are just going to say, yeah, I've heard that one before. Oh, I don't believe you. And you see this now, by the way.
Sure.
Like, ArenaNet have said, we're doing strike missions. It's going to be challenging end game content. People don't believe them, right? They flat out don't believe ArenaNet. And could they have showed gameplay? I mean, I guess, right? They could have showed gameplay to avoid that, which maybe they probably should have done. But they said, oh yeah, we want to release strike missions every, like very frequently with story updates. But we don't believe them. And a lot of the kind of claims that ArenaNet are making right now, they're good claims. And, you should be excited about those claims. But because of the history of the game and the development cycle, they need to actually demonstrate that. And the proof is in the pudding in that regard. Anet need to just drop this and develop a bunch of stuff for like 6 months to a year. And then that's when I think the type of things that they can do with communication become a lot more effective. Because right now, sorry, ArenaNet, people don't believe you.
Yeah, I mean, okay, yes, right? This is a huge deal. So my graduate thesis is on YouTube apology videos. So I've spent a lot of
What's your favorite one? You like big fan of PewDiePie? Enjoy Sneb?
Yeah, the PewDiePie ones are in my data set.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what my favorite one is. There's some really nonsensical, like 45-minute apology videos where people don't even apologize and start talking about cats and like weird stuff. Anyway, it's the point was that I spent a lot of time looking up like PR apologies, etc. And you're very right about every single time you apologize, if you do the same like transgression or you commit the same crime, so to speak, it like doubles in what you have to do to make up for it. So if we look at the history, they've said, oh yeah, we're going to do alliances. And then they re-announced alliances. And then they didn't do it again, right? When they said, oh, don't worry, we're going to make alliances happen, for the third time, I was like, I don't believe them. I actually openly said that, right? I said, I absolutely don't believe them because they have proven on a track record that they can't do it, that they can't deliver. And I almost would rather them have just surprised me with alliances than told me that they were happening again. Because, like, not even kidding, because at this point, my sentiment towards alliances are I just don't even care anymore.
Would you still say that now?
Oh yeah, I just don't really care anymore.
Even after the
well, they're in beta, right? So I could be wrong about this, but when they announced it the third time, I thought that they said that the alliances were going to come by the end of the year, and I was like, "There's no way. There's no way that they get that done."
Wow,
right? There's just
you're broken.
Oh yeah, I just don't believe them, right? It's not that I don't like them or that I don't care or whatever. I have a hard time trusting them now because they've told me things, but they haven't followed through on the things that they said that they were going to do. And to boot, they didn't communicate that very well. What I will give them credit for is that now with alliances, when they have problems, they actually communicate that. And that's gone a long way for me. But it's really hard to break that sentiment, right? It's really hard. Like, another example is that when I hear of podcasts where a dev is like, oh yeah, we have all this data that, aspirational content is really positive for the game. And then I sit here and I go, then why have you not talked about making any new aspirational content for like a year and a half? So all the people that really enjoy endgame stuff, we sit here and we go, okay, well, they just let like this mood fester. And so as that grows, it becomes harder and harder and harder to control and harder to make up for. So I do not envy them, because like you, Teapot, I've interacted with a lot of devs. I think they're incredibly intelligent, incredibly hardworking people. I think they're funny. They make a great game. And you know what? It just sucks for them, I think. I think they have a really hard job, right? I think they have a really hard job. And I think sometimes throughout the history of Arena, they've overpromised and underdelivered. And now, in order to make up for that, they have to overdeliver and underpromise, essentially. That's like the only way that they can make up for this now. And so even if EOD like absolutely smashes people, it's never going to be good enough for people. And that is the worst possible situation to be in. If you're a PR professional, if you're a dev, right? Like that actually has to weigh on them. So I do not envy them. So the question is, like sometimes I sit down and I go, okay, at this point, what could ArenaNet do for me to make me feel more hyped about the game, or to make me believe in them more or trust them more? Mm-hmm. And for me, it would have to be they hit every deadline, they and for a long period of time, and the whole time that that's going on, they communicate everything. That they have radical transparency. They go, this is what's going on. We actually encountered this problem. We think we can take care of it. And you know what? Even if they miss the deadline, then I don't think I'd be as brutal on them, because they're at least telling me, they're humanizing themselves, right? Because when I look at ArenaNet, and I think when a lot of people do, they think of like a big office with red arches. They don't think about the people inside it that are actually working hard. One thing I think ArenaNet has done really well lately is these like little random posts where it's like a day in the life, right? Or they like tell like a story, like the great server outage, and then everybody like, this guy's like, this is what I had to do, and this is what went into it, and this is my job. When that happened, I went like, that guy is a boss, right? Like I like that guy now, right? And I think that humanizes people, and as a result, when they make a mistake, I am more forgiving.
But I think
I wish that we had more of that, because it's so perfect.
But it's everything that you just said, and the idea of it's like the idea of not being able to deliver. All of the things that they've been mentioning has almost made them go the opposite other direction, where they're just like, well, we're not gonna release that apology video. We didn't do, like, not saying that they believe they didn't do anything wrong, but like, because when you release apology, that means that this wasn't planned. So no, we have things planned. We're just not letting you know, and it's going to be crazy when we unveil it because you guys didn't know. So how do you feel about, like, how do you feel about that, community? Like, I really honestly feel that's what it is. It's in the complete opposite direction now. And that's why, like, it could be a cool thing, like the Griffin added to Path of Fire. You know what I mean? Like, that was something that you guys, that people didn't know about, that was added, that was cool. It's like, oh, this was something that we heard about, once we actually got to it. It was never talked about. And it's like, but you can't just not talk about, like, big features in the game that you've mentioned previously, and now you're just not saying anything. And you know what I mean? Like, especially since you were talking about not seeing gameplay. Like, they probably believe that there's a reason for that. That's what I'm saying. And I think my big thing, this goes into the main topic of what I was going to talk about today, we've been skirting it, is the hype around End of Dragons for people both inside and outside of the community versus other MMOs with their expansions. And I was kind of explaining it a little bit before we had gotten into the podcast, but it's kind of funny where World of Warcraft has been in the position that it's been in for a long time. Blizzard has been in the position that it's been in for a long time. And people would hate the game. There would be people that were like, I don't want to just, do a bunch of dailies every day and have to log in for things like Torghast, which is like a big, deep dungeon. And, have to farm for gear just, for the raids and whatnot. And, WoW's gone downhill, but there are still people that are hopeful that the next expansion is going to be good, and there's still hype around that, expansion. And then for Final Fantasy XIV, it's like they could delay it however many times because, and they did, they actually delayed it quite a bit, and they got rid of not doing a full raid. They usually release ultimate raids, which is their highest tier content, and they had delayed the first, and then they said that they pretty much weren't going to do it. But people were still really excited about Endwalker for the story. And for me, it's kind of funny, not even thinking about the promotion or the scheduling or anything like that we were just discussing, or the promises or their track record. For me, it's kind of like, I guess it does have a little bit of scheduling for me. A lot of people think that it's a lot of like promotion for the game, and that their advertising and marketing people like just aren't good enough for End of Dragons, and I know that that's a factor. But it's kind of neat thinking about it in a way where you compare like features and content that the game gives you. So for WoW, you would have new zones with quests, and then you'd have new gear sets, new dungeons, and raids eventually. They don't all come out on release. But people are really, really, really excited to bum rush to get to the highest level. That, people usually don't explore, they don't read the quests, they don't do anything extra. They get the gear, they farm whatever content is available to be raid ready. And then for 14, they might have a lot of features that are out, but the big thing is the story. So people bum rush the story because they're so excited to see how it ends. And then for Guild Wars 2, like, even without seeing as much gameplay, we have all of these new maps that have, heart quests and metas and events. And then we've heard that there are going to be strikes, we've heard there are going to be alliances, we've heard there's going to be fishing, extra mounts, skiffs, and things like that. And so purely on features that people might be interested in, to me, for Guild Wars 2, seems like on release they're almost providing more, if that makes sense. Because it's not just story that people are excited about. It's not just, bum rushing the levels to get to the first raid. There's a vast amount of things that you can do. And so for me, it's kind of odd that it seems like there isn't as much hype for End of Dragons as there are for, a game that people have been complaining about for years and just hoping that this expansion is better and that the raids are going to lift it up, which come in later patches. And then for 14, just having the story. And so I think one of my things, or a big thing, is that there's just as much content and features for these other two games, like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV, that get put out in scheduled patches. And I know there's a reason that ArenaNet hasn't done that, but for me, I'm excited about the expansion, not gonna lie, because I have so much that's ahead of me, and so I'm excited to see, like I mentioned before, all of it come together. But at the same time, it's like, what is it that's going to keep people engaged after that? So it's kind of like a 3-part question. Sorry about that. I went off on a little bit of a tangent.
Let me just address something real quick, because one thing I think that you're kind of suggesting, but maybe not explicitly saying, is you have a lot ahead of you, and you are a story-focused player, and the story is something that Guild Wars 2 actually does fairly well. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the story, for somebody like me, isn't very engaging. I guess my question is, do you like the story because of the narrative, or do you like the story because of how you play and interact with it?
Because of how you play and interact with it, and it connects to the lore in like previous things that you're doing, or it might connect to some random NPC that you see when you explore. But that's what I'm saying, is that you might not be interested in the story, and there's so much more for End of Dragons. So like, you haven't seen a lot of the gameplay. But there's the maps, which, like I said, have, all of the new vistas, hearts, like points of interest, things like that. So if you're excited about any of those other features, including the new mounts, the skiffs and things like that, or fishing, like, comparatively to other MMOs that only have story to bum rush, or getting through and leveling to get to end content for the next raid, it almost feels like Guild Wars 2 has more to offer, feature-wise, but only on release.
Diversity.
Yeah,
but the problem
more
is that
diverse,
the diversity doesn't have depth. I think. Sure. I don't know. Would you agree with that, Teapot? I'm curious what your opinion is here.
I'm pretty inclined to agree with Xandrii, actually, on this. I think Guild Wars 2 actually does release with an certainly with an expansion. With Living Story, I would not agree with this, not always anyway. But with the expansion, I would say yes. I think you typically get a pretty big drop. Ender Dragons maybe a little bit less so. There's no like Omega feature with Ender Dragons. There's no mounts or gliding or new class, right? You know, when HT was Revenant and Masteries, Path of Fire was mounts, right? It's like a big drop, like a big bomb that's being dropped from the game, and that's going to radically change things. EOD less so, but still, I think there actually is a lot. Like, if the maps deliver and they're replayable, yeah, you could be playing those for years. You'll never leave them. You'll be farming them every day, right? And they'll still be replayable, and they'll still be cool and cinematic and fun. You'll have all the 9 new elite specializations. Again, that's going to radically change every area of the game. Now, these things aren't coming with the expansion, but they're kind of part of the expansion. Stuff like alliances coming into play, strike missions with challenge modes coming into play as well. Like that's very much bundled into the expansion. I think there are a lot of really good features. Perhaps not as many play hours as other games, but I think that's partially because there isn't any verticality to the game, right? When you're dealing with content in other MMOs, you're going to play it a whole bunch because you've got to keep doing it to progress through it and, again, get your gear to go do your raids and stuff like that. Right. But bear in mind, raids don't typically drop. They don't drop with WoW anyway. Like when WoW comes out, they'll drop dungeons at the start of the expansion and the raid will come a little bit later. And this is why I think Ender Dragons is very interesting from an expansion point of view. Guild Wars 2 has never dropped an endgame PvE at the same time as an expansion. And they are doing that now with strike missions. And even with challenge modes after that, right? This actually is a new development, so I think that's pretty exciting. So
the challenge modes are coming after, though.
Yeah, they're coming they're releasing them like a few weeks after, I believe. Yeah, to make sure that people don't burn them. Well, I think they want to generate like a little bit of like CM number 1, CM number 2, hype, right? Like people are gonna go for it, people are gonna try and do it. So I think that's what they're trying to do with that. But I really want to address the other part of this because this question is like, we could argue about this, blah,
sure.
we could debate, we could call people from WoW and they say, WoW is so good, it releases so much content. But I think the interesting thing here is the hype part actually, because where does hype come from? Hype is not people outside of the game looking at like, oh wow, I can't wait to play this game that I've never played before. Like that isn't where hype comes from. I feel like hype, particularly around MMOs, is internal. Like, where was all of the hype coming from with 14? Within 14.
Right.
Where was all the hype about World of Warcraft coming from? Within World of Warcraft. It's not an external thing. So it makes sense that there's like not a lot of buzz right now because Arena aren't really focusing on that. And I think that, again, it makes a little bit of sense because of the reason we talked about previously. I don't think the community, like the veteran community, is hypeable. Like, what could they possibly say that would get everyone excited? Like, nothing, right? Really, like, they can't really do anything. So in a very, very weird way, it almost makes sense the way they're doing this in terms of marketing, because you want to get people external to the game really excited. You want them to be aware of it when it's about to happen, right? Like, if you release a massive, really cool cinematic trailer 6 months ago for Ender Dragons, no one's remembering that, right? No one's going to remember like, wow, you remember that? Dude, I'm hyped. I'm going to be hyped for a whole year to play this game that doesn't exist yet. No, of course, that's not how it works, right? Like, you want to drop the trailer, boom, trailer, play the game, right? Or hype, play the game immediately. I think that's why they're doing this this delayed approach. It kind of sucks for everyone within the community a little bit, but I understand what they're trying to do here. And I think that also explains why a lot of the stuff they've been doing has been very, again, aimed towards the internal existing community. Like, a lot of the streams they've done, they only mean something if you already play the game. The original cinematic teaser trailer, it means nothing to anyone outside of the game. They did some marketing with some streamers in the WoW section, I believe, and even in some League of Legends enjoyers, stuff like this. And they would just play this random cinematic cutscene of like Aurene flying around, and there's like another character, another one of these new characters from the story. It means nothing. And these adverts, they were not very effective in my opinion, because again, like, it just didn't mean anything to anyone who didn't play the game already. Right. But now that we're getting really close to the release, I think that's when they can actually start to build the external hype. I think the reason why people don't feel, we aren't feeling the energy is because I don't think ArenaNet's really worried about internal hype. They want to get to the point where they can start getting people outside of the game looking at it and playing it and buying it. And to be honest, the way to do that is close to release, in my opinion. I don't think you really want to do this really far out because people will simply have forgotten by the time the date actually comes around.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder just in general, just going past that, if some of the things that a lot of people really enjoy, which just gains more of that trust, is not even having something that is being completely transparent or saying we're going to do this, but maybe having new content that comes out on a schedule. You know what I mean? Like, and again, like we were talking about, they're not necessarily really worried about, the internal hype, but I feel like that might be one of the areas that it falls short. I'm just talking about MMOs in general, like WoW and 14.
WoW doesn't do that though.
They don't anymore. They used to. It used to be that big raids would come out every patch, and then you would have Heroic come out in another patch, and then Mythic would be ready in another patch, and then they'd have another tier.
That's implicit though. It's not actually explicit. Like they don't say that. People just know that's going to happen. Right?
Sure, but then they get ready for it. Or like for 14, it actually comes out on a schedule. It's every 3 months you get... So, for example, Endwalker just released. And then for 6.1, you always have more story and Alliance raid, which is a big raid. And then for this one, they're doing Island Expeditions, which you get to like take care of animals, which is kind of cool the way that they do it, but it's kind of like fishing in Guild Wars 2. It's just going to be like a hobby. And then always in 6.2... they'll have like a new tier for a raid, but it's literally like every like 3 to 5 months that they have.
But we know that. Then the Guild Wars 2 does that. We do know that because we know that they're going to do Living Story afterwards. Almost certainly, we know that's going to happen.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? What I'm getting at here, like what I'm getting at here is that realistically, the game isn't that different. I agree that ArenaNet should probably go a bit above and beyond because, again, they need to rebuild consumer trust. But that's what the problem is. It's not actually that the future of the game is necessarily uncertain of what they're going to do. We know what they're going to do. Like ArenaNet releases expansions, then they do episodic content every 3 months or so. We know they do that.
But I meant more than just like having a story that comes out with a new map. Like content like full patches rather than episodic content like Living World. Whether or not that would actually help is what I was saying. Like I was just suggesting, like, would that like build people's enthusiasm for post-release play? Kind of like you guys are upset about, or not you guys are upset, but like people are upset that there aren't like more raids or, or that fractals haven't come out like in more
We have strike missions.
Right. And I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying, like, do you see what I mean in the difference between that? So, like, not just Living World with a story with a map, which is cool, but, like, more other, like, features that people could look forward to that might not necessarily be on release. But it's hard because they give you so much on release for the expansion. If that makes sense.
I'm being a little combative here because I want to push this
you
because
can be
this is a really
That's fine.
This is a really interesting it's a really interesting thing because in a way they have done this, right? Like we know they're going to release strike missions with each episode at this point, hopefully. In theory, we know that alliances are going to be coming. We know that they've already talked about doing regular balance passes on the game with the expansion too. Right. Like to me, it's just they need to deliver that. Right? Like they have. We haven't seen they have kind of talked about this stuff. Right. They have said that they're going to do this. In a way, they're being pretty open. If you actually read what they say, they've talked about a lot of things they want to do. Now, I think again, to me, the issue isn't that they haven't done this or that it won't happen. It's just that people don't believe them.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, right? Like, you can tell me, they can tell me all they want that they're going to make these challenge modes for strikes, like, really challenging. But I can only go by what we currently have because they have shown us absolutely nothing when it comes to the strike CMs, right? I can only reference what we have. The last piece of aspirational content, in my opinion, that we've had was really the last fractal, because the DRMs, that's probably the most recent like group content, those were pretty weak, right? I mean, I went into DRMs blind with 4 people using a fractal comp and we cleared all the CMs on our first try. And so to me, that's not really aspirational content. It's not super challenging because I'm not Snow Crows, right? I'm just some pleb, and I did it with just like a regular comp, right? And so I look at that. I look at the strike missions we currently have, and I go, the strike missions we currently have are a breeze. I completed the 5, so not Cold War and not Forging Steel, but I completed the 5 in like 13 minutes the other day with like just people from the stream. So I look at this and I go, okay, are they actually going to be challenging? That's my problem. I don't know if I can believe them yet, and that is a massive issue. Massive.
This is what I meant about the fact that what's actually different from Guild Wars 2 to MMOs like 14 and WoW isn't that they don't release this stuff or they don't say they're going to. They release less, don't get me wrong. The amount of content that 14 and WoW get is certainly superior. WoW, honestly, a bit more debatable. Like Shadowlands has been really tricky, right? It's been like nearly
absolutely
2/3 of a year, right? Since patch 9.1 or whatever. So they've had definitely some issues with their development cycle. But 14, they're pretty consistent with pumping stuff out. Even that game does have some downtime, to be fair. But I agree, like that game really has a proper schedule going on there. But the thing is, what's the difference? The difference is history, right? People aren't worried about 14's content releases because they know it's going to happen. How do they know it's going to happen? Because it has been happening, right? For the past few years. They delivered again and again and again. They've hit this boom, 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 boom. And it's kind of the same thing with WoW. Even if the WoW expansion is horrible, the lore is butchered, the jailer is the worst character ever made, horrible game, terrible lore, Sylvanas is all over the place, she's going berserk, right? As a burning tree, doesn't matter. It does not matter because you know they're going to release a raid and it will be good. You know it will be. Right, and in patch 9.2, even though I don't even play the game, I know that raid is going to be good when it comes out. Right. And the encounters are going to be interesting. It's going to be exciting to watch the guilds go for worlds first. I know that, like with 100% certainty. And the problem is that do I know with 100% certainty that the strike missions in Guild Wars 2 are going to be challenging and engaging? No, I absolutely don't know that. Not even close. Sorry, Arena, I don't. And you're going to have to see it to believe it. I don't need to see the next raid of next mythic raid or the next ultimate raid to know that's going to be exciting. That's going to be hype. That is going to be crazy. And it's going to be super interesting to tackle that or watch other people tackle that. With Guild Wars C, you don't have that. We don't even know that alliances will work, right? I want to be clear. I'm being very devil's advocate here because I think it's important to explore this like from the other side. I am really hyped about alliances. I think they are a really good system. I've really enjoyed the beta tests, but do I know with certainty, with the same level of confidence that mythic raids will be exciting in WoW, that alliances are going to work? No, I don't. And that should concern everyone. It should concern Arena because I don't even play WoW. I don't even play 14. And I know that their raids are going to be good. And I don't know that the game I play every single day is going to have good releases and good systems. I don't know that.
I love how that's what I was trying to say, but you worded it better, and with your accent, it just sounded a lot better. I'm over here, like, mushing all of my words, and I'm like, you get what I mean? And you're like, yeah, let me go off on this for a second. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to say.
I just have one quick thing I wanted to mention. I think we can sum this up in, it is very difficult to hype people that are extremely skeptical.
Yes.
That's really the TLDR, right? It is very difficult to get people very excited, almost irrationally excited about something if they are rationalizing it very hard and thinking, I don't know. Like if they don't trust you, if they're really skeptical about it, it's very hard. And I think perhaps that's I sit in this kind of like, I feel like it's a roller coaster ride. Some days I'm like, EOD, yes. Like everything's gonna be amazing. And other days I'm like the trauma. Right?
I feel like
I don't know.
Especially content creators, it's almost like I know it's a meme, but like especially for like Teapot joking around, like you've been posting on for like your titles for your streams, like I've run out of content. Give me content, please. And I'm almost kind of going, I feel like people are excited about EOD, like regardless of what they release and regardless of how good it is, just to be like, I have something to do. I have something to stream for you guys. Isn't that lovely? So, I mean, I know it's been more of a meme than anything, but Let's talk about this that's in chat. I wasn't going to, but let's discuss for a moment. Do you guys really think that it's only 2% of the people that like to raid that
less?
It's way less.
Less
Way
than
less.
2%. Less than 2%. Yeah.
So why should we cater to them with more challenging raids and new raids then?
Well, you shouldn't cater to them. Like that's not what we mean, right? You should supply
way I
them with
worded
some
it,
kind of
wasn't-
content, right? Yeah, no, I think they're like, look, I would be the first to admit, if you're only going after 2% of your player base, then you're probably not targeting exactly correctly, right? Like if you're dumping like 80% of your resources and 2% of the demographic, that's a problem.
Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But here's the thing. Look, if you look at other MMOs like World of Warcraft, I guarantee that 20% of the player base isn't speedrunning Mythic, right?
Oh, no,
I don't
absolutely
think
not.
that. I don't think that's how it works. But the cool thing is, like, I watch old school RuneScape content because I think it's incredible what people will do when they optimize things, or when they figure out certain paths, or they do like some cool challenge, right? It's aspirational content. I'm not that kind of player. I'm the player that's like, I'm just walking around in the world and I'm skilling some stuff for fun. And like, I look at these other players and I go, wow, like that's really cool. I wish I could do that. Like that's really neat. How do they do that? But in Guild Wars 2, we so infrequently have content like that 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 is actually kind of dying a little bit. Aspirational content is actually a really positive thing. And there was I believe it was Deeg's podcast. Was it Cameron that was on it? I don't recall exactly who it was. But they talked about, I think Cameron mentioned that they had data that supported that aspirational content was actually a really positive thing for the community. And that when they released these fractals, they saw upticks in like people playing the game and such. So using logic, if that is true, then why would we not want to support aspirational content at least a little bit? Why would we throw away raids? Why would we throw away all of these communities when it's obvious that it has a positive impact on the game? That's my problem.
Or can have a positive impact on the game, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just for the people that do it either. If you have like raid tournaments like HRP, right? Teapot hosts this big raid tournament. You have all these big guilds involved. I'm never going to be in that tournament. I'm a pleb. I suck, right? Like, I just enjoy doing the raids, right? But you know what? I watch that and I go, wow, they just did something I've never seen before. Or their strategy on this boss, very unique. Why are they doing it like that? This is such a puzzle. They did so well, right? So I look at this and I go, wow, like, this is incredible. I'm never going to get there. Perhaps, but what they just did is really neat. And I wish that we actually, as a community, supported that notion maybe even a bit more, because it's really cool what people can do at a high level, whether it's PvP, whether it's fractals, whether it's raids. When people, put their brains together and think, how do we like break this? Like, how do we make this like so fast it's unbelievable? People do some really interesting things.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of incredible too. And for some reason, people always hate when I talk about this, and I don't know why. But especially from a content creation standpoint, where it's a lot of people like to complain or, whatever, regardless of the actual levity and severity that Guild Wars 2 and ArenaNet's promotion has or does not have. A lot of it is on the community to do for themselves. So if you have people that are really interested in doing raids like this and doing challenge modes and doing like speed runs of content. For example, one of the biggest things in like other MMOs is, like we were talking about Teapot, like World First, that's always hype because of the new raids. Like the new raids are always going to be good and it's always going to be hype. Those are going to be the channels that have the most people because people are excited to see it. And so you would think that more of that content would be released to have that 2% of people wanting to do it grow, or at least the people that are interested in the game grow, because they'll be like, oh, Guild Wars 2, they actually have an influx of viewers on Twitch. Let's see what it is. Oh, people are doing the new raid. Let's check it out and watch, which will get more, outreach to people because it's on the community. And a lot of people really dislike that for some reason in a lot of MMOs, but it is there. There's still competition. So I'm sorry, I accidentally cut you off, Teapot.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. I was just preparing to unleash my fury.
Do it.
I mean, the problem with raids, yeah, like Arena has tried to make challenging content, but this has been Arena's, in my opinion, their ultimate weakness, their ultimate sin. Do you know what that is? It's pride is their ultimate sin. They have historically tried to reinvent the wheel a lot. And the thing that they've been incredibly resistant to is the idea of different difficulty settings in the game. And I know this is such a boring topic. It's been done a million times. This is the simple fact of the matter. The problem with raids is simple. It only targets, like, let's be incredibly generous and say 5% of the player base. Well, I'll be very generous and say that. We'll say 5%. That is not economically viable. It's just not. Particularly seeing as it's incredibly hard to develop. They have fully developed maps that come with them, boss models, custom animations. A huge amount of QA testing is going to go into making its balanced right. Is it possible? The challenge mode, right? Blah, blah, blah. This is harder to make than story. I'm sorry. It just is. It's incredibly hard. Like, raids are very high effort. And when you only have 5% of the player base playing them, or even less than that, if you look at some of the stats on Wing 7, go and look at Guild Wars 2 efficiency. The numbers are right there, guys. They are right there. You can see them. Bear in mind, efficiency is an overestimate because a very small amount of players are even on efficiency. So it will be way lower than the actual numbers you see there. Go and check them. The problem is the game isn't accessible. And it's a huge paradox. It's funny to me. Guild Wars 2 is the accessible casual game, but yet it is far less accessible than every other MMO. Like 14 and WoW are way more accessible than this game, right? You've got the Holy Trinity. You don't have a dodge roll. The combat's a lot slower paced. It's a lot less movement oriented than in Guild Wars 2. And then to top it all off, the raids in Guild Wars 2 are actually kind of hard, right? Like, if you're a new player and you came out of, just doing the story at level 80, and you go into a raid, you're going to get annihilated, right? You'll get crushed by these encounters, completely ripped to shreds. Like, whereas in World of Warcraft, well, you can just do the nice, cozy looking for raid option, and not only do you not have the social barrier of making a group, you press a button and it teleports you to the raid, you also don't have the mechanical barrier, because the game basically completes itself for you and you just get to witness the story. That is why raids exist in WoW and Final Fantasy XIV, because they are accessible. So that 2% isn't 2% in those games. It's nearly 100%, right? Everyone can beat the story content and enjoy even the instant stuff in those games, because it's not hard at a baseline level, but then you can ramp it up and make yourself suffer if you want to, right? Guild Wars 2 is a game a lot about choice and freedom. The only problem is that when it comes to the actual end game, they won't let you choose the difficulty, right? Other games do. Guild Wars 2 doesn't. That is why raids and instance content in general has always been a problem, because Arena don't like to do things that have like a challenge mode component to them, right? Or like a multiple difficulty setting. They've always tried to do this. Oh yeah, we're going to make ramping difficulty, right? Through all this content. The issue with that is that every piece of content doesn't work for everyone. Strike missions are way too easy for good players right now, but funny enough, they're actually still too hard for a lot of newer players. Like, a lot of the strikes, Whisper Jaw Mag, most players aren't beating that. Bone Skinner, most players aren't beating that. It's just not going to happen.
I'll help you level wherever you want.
I think that they've tried, we're going to do a difficulty round. We're going to get people to get better at the game. No, you aren't. People don't care about being good at your video game. They're here to, like, press some buttons and look at some cool effects and, dress up their human female booba meta at the same time.
Actually, I do like that you mentioned it, though, because, like, especially for the ramping up in difficulty for 14, and it's actually great that someone had mentioned this in chat, that it was only 2%. Like I said, for Endwalker, which was the new expansion for Final Fantasy XIV to be released, they postponed Ultimate, which is the toughest raid that they have, which is a gauntlet, and literally only about, this is pulling a number out of my butt because I don't actually know the number, but it's a very, 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 very small percent that does it, because you get like skins for weapons and you get a title. And a lot of people aren't going to do it for those things, but also there aren't a lot of people who can sink all of their time into it. And there was a huge fight in the community when they postponed and then eventually said, okay, well, we're not going to have an ultimate in Shadowbringers. We're going to implement it later on in Endwalker, because people were like excited because they thought that Square's, they were geared towards the correct portion of the population. Because, well, if only 2% of people do Ultimate, what's the matter? But again, like I said, it was, the promotion. It's one of their biggest things that people stream, and it's content that people still enjoy, that they've always promised, that they've always put out, like we were discussing, which has always been on a schedule. It's always been there, and there are people that only stream that content. There are people that only stream Savage Raiding, and there are people that only stream Ultimate, and those are like the biggest streamers for Final Fantasy XIV, other than a couple. And so the community was torn apart. Like, some people were upset at the devs because they're like, Ultimate's the only reason that I play. Like, I don't even care about the story, which normally isn't. That's not like the average player in Final Fantasy XIV. Like, they'll bum rush through everything, wait for Ultimate, and then only do Ultimate, and that's the only time they stream 14. And then there were other people that were like, well, it's only 2% of the community. They're talking about the bigger picture. Why would they care about you? So it's neat to see it implemented to Guild Wars 2 and talk about this question, because it was such a big thing for Final Fantasy XIV, and it was recent too. It was literally like right before the expansion was going to drop, so it's kind of incredible. And I wasn't expecting people to be like, to debate it in chat. That was kind of fun.
I want to let Sneb say something, but I have to respond to it. Like, yeah, this already happened, right? Like, do you know what the difference is? That conversation about there not being a new Ultimate, that happened in Guild Wars 2 like 3 years ago, Like, do you know where all the players went after there wasn't a wing, a new raid wing for like a year? Yeah, they went to Final Fantasy 14 and WoW, right? I mean, like, yeah, it already happened. Like, the players who were there fighting the good fight for the raid scene, yeah, they just quit the game. So yeah, there isn't going to be that type of energy in the community anymore. I guess in that regard, I think there still will be, and I think that Guild Wars 2 does have this is another can of worms to be honest, but Guild Wars 2 is a little bit anti-tryharding as a community. It is the anti-MMO. Guild Wars 2 is the game that isn't WoW. It's the game that isn't Final Fantasy.
Sure.
So everything about those games is going to be somewhat rejected by the community, I think. But that's, yeah, like I said, that's another very, very different conversation. But yeah, I mean, this did happen in Guild Wars 2. When raids got added, there was uproar about like, oh, this is not WoW. Why are you making it into WoW? Right? There was uproar when raids stopped coming as well. People were like, where is the raid? Where's the raid? Where's the raid? People posted about the anniversary of Wing 7, the 2-year anniversary of Wing 7. You do have this stuff. But yeah, like, these discussions are obviously going to happen because the type of player who cares about ultimates and savage raiding is the type of player who is going to actually make their voice heard, right? Like, there's always going to be the most engaged players are going to be the players who are most likely to actually start conversations and like, oh, what's going on here, right? And to start sparking that discussion. So that makes sense. But yeah, I do completely agree. Obviously, I think that promotion is really important, and making these really challenging difficulty modes is actually a really good thing for the game. Both Final Fantasy and WoW get loads of attention because of these raids. I think WoW in particular absolutely pops off when there's a new raid out. You can see like 1 million viewers sometimes, right, on that video game when people are looking at all of the the crazy like new bosses coming out. But I think it is really worth noting that if there was only Mythic or even only Heroic or only Savage and only Ultimate, you would get far less of that content and it probably wouldn't even exist.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The only reason why the harder content can exist is because there is an accessible version of that to the other players. Yes, it's absolutely very, very hype. It's really exciting. But the problem is that just that hype and excitement probably isn't worth it if most of your players can't engage with that. Maybe that's not the case in 14 because they do have this more boss in a box strike mission style content. So it's maybe not as challenging for them to actually make these encounters and make that content. But for Guild Wars 2 and World of Warcraft, there is a huge amount of like massive environmental detail and a huge amount of work that goes into developing this end game content that, well, the goal of this is to address this with strike missions in Guild Wars 2, right? But I do think that you have to give a little bit of ground here, and accessibility is a really, really big important thing. Just look at history. World of Warcraft raids started out as 40-player raids in the original vanilla WoW. That's not gonna fly today. I'm sorry, no way. Like you know, they were, and the thing is, it didn't then either. You know, people say, oh, gamers these days, they're a bunch of casuals. Back in my day, I killed 30,000 insects before I raided every single day.
Yeah,
I was farming bugs 24/7. Ah, yes. Nah, you were a casual as well.
Yeah.
Like back in the day, WoW raids weren't popular. Vanilla raids weren't popular.
No.
Like barely anyone did that. Like the final raid, which was actually the only raid that had a legitimate challenge, Nax Ramus, it was cleared by like 20 guilds, right? 20 in the in all of the world.
And the
right?
bosses
or
were
cool.
Like,
right?
And
They
the
were
aesthetics
cool.
were gorgeous. And that's kind of how I felt about doing the raid wings for, not to interrupt you, but for Guild Wars 2. Is like, it's unfortunate that not as many people do them because they're fucking gorgeous. Like, they're so pretty. So, I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. But it was a very, very minimum amount of guilds. I think it might have been like 20 on NA, so it might have been like 40, 50 total, right, for Nax Ramus back in the day. But they weren't popular then. Like, raids only became like this more mainstream thing as they became more accessible. And you can see this over the course of WoW, right? Vanilla, 40-man only, no difficulty settings. Burning Crusade, they reduced it. 25-player raids, some 10-man raids as well. They reduced the amount of players you need to do it. Then you got to Wrath of the Lich King. They added a dungeon finder, so you could get a group anytime you wanted for dungeons, right? They also added heroic dungeons in Burning Crusade. Then you had heroic raids in Wrath of the Lich King, and they had normals, 10-player raids and 25-player modes for all of the raids. Very important to note that. Everything was now doable with 10 players. And then now in the future, where we are now, Cataclysm added another difficulty setting with looking for raid, right? And now we even have flex. Right, you can actually go into a raid in WoW with an arbitrary amount of people, and the raid will automatically scale. Right, this is no coincidence. The reason that is happening is because that is how you make your content actually worth developing and get the maximum bang for your buck. You make it accessible. You make it appealing to as many people as possible to make sure that all of that hard work you're putting in is actually going to give you a return. And it's weird, you know, people always say, oh, you know, Guild Wars 2, they should do it anyway, or blah, blah, blah. No, like, Guild Wars 2 ultimately just doesn't do it right. And it's crazy to say that because literally every other MMO does this pretty much, but there you go. Like, Guild Wars 2, we finally got there in the end. 10 years after launch, we are actually getting scalable difficulty story-based content.
And I wonder, like, it's not even an argument or anything for this, but I wonder, like, if the reasoning for that and the people... regardless of the amount of people that actually do the raids, but for how there isn't like a scaling difficulty, and so the one raid is like either too accessible or not accessible enough for people. I wonder if that has to do with how many different like builds and traits there actually are, and so they don't know how. It's gonna sound weird, but I wonder if they like don't know how to scale up or down the difficulty based on the amounts of different gear sets that you can have and the amounts of different styles that you can play, and because there isn't a trinity. Like, I'm actually curious. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I wonder if they try to make it so that no matter what, you can walk into the raid. And I'm not talking about like player ability.
Let me unleash here.
Yeah, sorry. And I'm not even talking about player ability. I'm just like, I wonder if that's part of it.
This is my moment. Okay, so I've trained a lot of people in raids. I've played a lot of raids. I raid on like 5 accounts or something. I full clear like 3 times a week sometimes. The number one problem is that people just have no idea how to counter mechanics with the tools that their class has. They don't know what their traits do. They don't know what their skills do.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this to be like, oh, people aren't smart enough to read. No. It's just complicated.
I heard you were the most toxic, so...
The game is very complicated. It's deceptive, right? Because you go throughout the open world and things are pretty simple, right? You walk up to something, it's kind of like a Path of Exile and Diablo 3, where you kind of just go and like there's the trash mobs where you just rip through them, right? Guild Wars 2 presents kind of like that, an open world, but then flexes towards a more like a World of Warcraft when you go into raids. So it's strange for people, right? They go, holy crap, what is this? And they just have there's no tells really, right? Like the game isn't like, yeah, this is the attack you lost to, instant replay. There's no kill cam like Call of Duty or something. So people actually have no idea why they died a lot of the time. They're just like, why did we die? What happened? How did I get teleported? Why did I get teleported? Wait, why did this person die? Why are we resetting? Like people have constant questions like that, and it's like not even their fault, right? So when we're talking about these difficulty settings, Guild Wars 2 suffers from one of two things. You either have content that is so easy that you can go in with anything and kill it, or you have content where people have to like adjust their compositions and their skills and like, you know, maybe their gear or whatever. And it just, that particular jump is like impossible for most players, because that jump doesn't happen in any other place other than this more difficult aspirational content.
Sure.
And so up until that point, if you've never considered, oh, what do my stats actually do? How do they interact with my skills? Concentration is boon duration, and boon duration does what to each skill on my bar? Oh, this skill provides boons if I put this trait on. Like that becomes super complicated all of a sudden. And then you take that and you go, okay, now I have to understand how subgroups work and understand that some of the boons on these skills apply to 5 people, some are 10, and some are just me. And I want to ensure that everyone in my squad has those boons. Not just getting to there, I already realized that I probably lost people, because this is real. It's complicated. It's very stressful. And so you can't even blame, like, I feel like Arena is in the worst position ever with this, because no matter what they do, they're going to either make content that's too easy for people or way too hard. I don't know how they actually could go and make something that's like medium. Because, I mean, I've taken groups into Mersad Overseer and wiped for 3 hours because they just don't know how anything works, right? They have no concept of how boons work. They have no concept of how the combat system works. They have no concept of how the stats work. There was a chrono doing 3k DPS. I thought they were like minstrel chrono. It turns out that they were running essentially like the wizard's amulet type stuff. So they just had all Condi damage. They're just like, I made a DPS build. I'm like, okay, well, you have no precision and you have no expertise. So you have no Condi duration and so your build's actually really inefficient. You're trying to do both at the same time. But they're like, what do you mean? It just never occurs to them. And so unless people heavily rely on somebody to just tell them exactly what to do, by like, you got to play this build and do this thing and then walk them through the content, ArenaNet's in like just like the worst possible position with this. I don't know how you would make I don't know how you make it ramp well unless you teach them in story and open world content.
In a way, I don't even view this as a problem. I don't even view it as a problem. So I don't think they're in a bad position. You just need to make the easy mode really, really easy. And then you can make the hard mode a lot harder, because you're right.
Look at current strikes though. Aren't those like wicked easy?
I mean,
let's
they are, but they're
Bone
not.
Skinner and Whisper. Like those three you can literally walk in with like anything, right? And you can kill them.
Yeah, they're not easy enough.
Well, like what is easy enough, right?
Easy enough is Freezy. I love Freezy. Because they even talked about numbers. So the first ever strike mission added was actually part of Winter's Day as like a one-off, I guess a bit of a test, a bit of an interesting idea, where you go and fight Freezy the Snowman. And Arena even said on stream, there was a stream about it, and it was really interesting. They said something like, if at least 5 people make it to the boss, the success rate is around 90%, like 90 to 95%. That, in my opinion, is what the difficulty for all story mode content instant story mode content should be. And it
Isn't
should
it
be
already like that though?
I mean, yeah. The difference though is that you should just have a hard mode where it's really, really difficult, or at least, you know, much more engaging at that point. I think that's fine. I think at that point you're good to go, right?
I mean, yeah, but how does this ramp? I guess the problem is that
why does it need
there's no ramp, right? Like you have easy mode stuff. How do you, is the hard mode gonna like ramp up and I don't know how to express this.
Why does it need to?
Because look at what we currently have, right? You have easy, super hard, right? That's
I don't actually think a ramp is super necessary. I would say that most people who play through the story in Final Fantasy never do any of the challenging stuff.
Yeah,
and they never will. They have no interest in doing that.
That'd be accurate.
And in WoW too, like most of the people who play through looking for raid, they're never going to even do normal. They have no interest in doing so. So why are we trying to force people to get good at the game when they just don't care? And
I'm trying to get people that actually want to be good at the game to have some sort of system by which to get good at it. So here's the thing. Like I take somebody who really wants to get into raids, and it is like so difficult to walk through all of this stuff with them. So difficult. Because I'm now telling them to basically go read an encyclopedia of raids. They have to watch.
It's not raids though. Like you said it yourself, in my opinion. It's nothing to do with raids. Raids aren't hard in this game whatsoever. What's difficult is understanding how all of your skills work and how the combat works. Like
yeah, and I feel like that can be accomplished by some kind of ramp, right? Like if people were to go and be introduced into mechanics.
I think a lot of
sort
it
of
is
without it being all at once, right? Like you go into a raid boss and suddenly everything matters all at once. What I'm trying to express is that there's no like, okay, now this matters, now this matters, now this matters. It goes, nothing matters, everything matters. If there was something like, okay, you're learning stability now because stability is important. It'll prevent you from getting knocked down. Look at this. This boss is like the stability boss, right? It's going to try to knock you down at given intervals. It's not going to be super threatening otherwise, but like you need to actually use stability to kill this story encounter, right?
What if you don't have stability in your build?
I was just going to say that.
Then it would give you an item that you can hold that would give you stability.
So what then players are going to rely on that item. They won't actually understand the concept.
No. Like,
I think what you're getting at is
I'm trying to learn the boon.
People,
it's a learn the boon.
Right. You just want people to be more guided.
I want them to be engaged in what they're seeing on their bar, right?
It doesn't work. It doesn't work though because people didn't learn the break bar stuff after the way station and the Iceberg Saga action key. People don't associate break bars with doing crowd control. They associate break bars with pressing the action key.
Well, I think what Sneb is trying to say that like maybe in other games, like for example, for you to learn your class, other than just reading for certain things and to learn your utilities, there's actual like class quests or smaller instances that help you along the way. Just like more of a guide, I think is what you're trying to say, right, Sneb? Like not necessarily a ramp in difficulty, but like a direction of where to go because these things might come up rather than you having never used a specific utility that you have in your toolkit and then getting into a raid and someone being like, oh, well, you need to use this specific ability. And you're like, well, I've never used that before. Like I have my full set of utilities that, are perfect for what I was doing out in the open world because there was nothing really that was challenging me. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, what I'm trying to express is that when you hit level 80 and you ask, what is there to do in Guild Wars 2? And people say, oh, you can try strikes and all this. And you're like, sweet. Then you go into a strike and you get ass handed to you because you have absolutely no concept of what anything does, right? You don't know what your boons do. You don't know what any of your traits do. You don't know how anything interacts or works together. And that's because you've never been put in a situation where you actually need to engage with any of that.
Yeah,
what I'm suggesting is that there is a ramp up and a guide by which you can understand and learn those things throughout the gameplay experience.
I love how I don't even remember how we got here. Like this wasn't part of what I was talking about at all. I'm like, wait, why are we even discussing this? I was talking about the hype around the expansions, and then someone mentioned
3 facts of life. 2%. There's 3 facts of life. death, taxes, and us talking about difficult modes.
I know. I'm like, I didn't even bring that up as a topic. It just sort of happened. Like, even my dog's out there howling. He's like, I don't know what you guys were on about. What the heck?
It's because this is the thing. Like, this is the topic to an extent. It's
Right.
This conversation is a conversation about accessibility. Ultimately.
No,
And
I mean, I know like what the
difficult things are that.
conversation's about. I just, especially for,
Well, no,
like,
what
it just
I
took
mean-
us
no,
a
no,
while
sorry,
to get here,
no.
and I'm like,
Yeah, what I mean is when we're talking about new player experience, when we're talking about content being appealing to people and people learning about the game, that is a topic that it, has to be discussed, right? Like that's why inevitably, like that's why Sneb says it is so inevitable, because it is one of the big things that the game struggles with. This is the flaw in Guild Wars 2 that no one talks about, right? It is the fact that the game is hard. Much harder than other games.
Sure.
And look, there's actually a lot of historical revisionism on this, but this is completely true. Guild Wars 2 was always designed to be a hardcore PvP game. Obviously, they completely moved away from that. But Guild Wars 2 on release was a hardcore PvP, open world PvP game. That is a
arena
fact.
net. Yeah, I mean,
Right,
that's,
yeah.
that's what they were.
Yeah. And people tend to deny that these days, but it is absolutely true, right? Obviously, it's gone in a much more PvE-centric way. It's funny. I see a lot of parallels between New World and Guild Wars 2, actually. New World, again, did this exact same thing. It started out as a hardcore PvP game. Now it's very much a PvE game, a casual PvE game. And nothing wrong with that. It's just interesting to observe, like, the same
Sure.
kind of trends, actually, being completed, right, by these games there, too. But... yeah, like Guild Wars 2 was originally supposed to be very, very hardcore, and in a way, the way the game has been fundamentally designed is fundamentally opposed to its design direction now. Like the Guild Wars 2 combat system and a casual PvE game, these are oil and water. They are incompatible. The reason why the content in Guild Wars 2 has to be extremely easy, as in unfailable, is simply because if it isn't, then people won't be able to complete it, because the way the game is set up is that if you have an understanding of the combat system, everything becomes way easier, and if you don't, everything is impossible.
Mm-hmm. I just think it's funny that, like, these are just things that I've observed, especially since I was going back and forth between 14 and Guild Wars 2, so it's not like pulling, it out of thin air, and I'm just like, oh, like, these are questions that I would have and I would ask you guys. And then it, like, for some people it comes across as complaining, and I'm like, wait, I'm not complaining. Like, I'm legitimately like, why is this the way it is? I'm observing the difference between the two. Like, I don't
I'm kind
think
of
people
tired
read
of people
very
saying that too. Like the whole like, oh, you're complaining about the game. I'm just like kind of exhausted by it, because
I like discussing the game.
yeah, like we're talking
Debate.
we're talking about these, and we're being
Debate.
critical, we're analytical, we're diving deep into things that we care about, and
I'll help you level
if complaining would be like, nah, Guild Wars 2 sucks, right? Like I'm gonna go on Reddit and complain
Terrible
about it and
game.
be all angry, right? Terrible game, bad game, and then not do anything about it, right? Every person that's in this podcast right now is doing something to better the game. And so if you think that's complaining, well, we got a big problem.
I'm just
you know?
increasing my knowledge of the game by things I think are fun, honestly. And I wasn't even, just to reiterate for anyone in chat, like, I wasn't trying to, like, say that there are certain ways that you should play the game. I wasn't, like, talking about
No,
people
do it. No,
having to
double
be
down.
better at anything. Like, I actually, I... And what I meant by people not reading wasn't based on anything I've done in the past. Was literally, like, I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily read their abilities, and that's not a bad thing either. If you don't want to, participate in certain things, and you have a certain standard for the game that you're able to complete without doing that, and you're having fun. That's all I'm saying. Like, I wasn't trying to. I don't know.
You should.
But I wasn't
There are
trying.
correct ways to play certain parts of the game, though.
Okay,
There are.
listen, you can see the bullet coming towards you, Xandrii. Allow me to jump in front of it for you. There are correct ways to play the game. This is true of any
There's
game.
no objective way
But
to
I wasn't
have fun
saying
in the game,
that I
though.
was right
That's the
about-
difference.
Right, and I wasn't saying that I was right about a way to play the game, or that I've always been right, or any spread of information. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say about certain things, because I genuinely like to ask questions. That's all I was saying.
Right?
So I didn't mean
listen,
for anybody to get upset and think I was complaining.
Listen, before the stream,
No,
we
they're
were
talking about me, Xandrii. It's fine. I get it almost every day.
Toxic.
Before the stream, we were talking about how Sneb is Canadian and waits for hours holding doors open, and you will like yell at people and fight with them. Okay, why have let's commit to that, right? Let's go on the offensive. No, let's go. I think it's time. Let's unleash. I'm ready to unchain. At this point, the thing is, any game that has a win condition will have a right answer, right, or answers that are more correct than others.
Sure.
That is just the way it is, right? If you're doing a sprint, right? In the 100-meter dash, you're going to have a much harder time running backwards than running forwards. That's not to say you can't do it while running backwards. You can, but you're probably going to lose to people who run forwards. And it's the same thing with video games. Like if you go in with no boons, right, and no gear, you run around naked and you just don't have any weapons equipped, it's going to be way harder than if you don't do that. And if you skill click, it's going to be way harder than if you don't. If you keyboard turn, it's going to be way harder than if you don't, right? All these things are like right and wrong, essentially. Like, they will change the way you interface with the game. There are correct ways to interface with the game. Like obviously you have a lot of flexibility within that, and the way people tend to interpret, you need to play a certain way, it's that it's very, very rigid. It isn't. The game is actually incredibly expansive with the amount of things and approaches that will work, but you have to choose an approach that actually makes sense within the context of the game. The game has rules. It says this is might, it's really good. This is quickness, it's also really good. This is alacrity, it's really good. You can't ignore that, right? It doesn't matter what you think. It won't change the fact that might, quickness, and alacrity are pretty important to winning and are really, really strong. It's a bit like, if you're playing, I think it really is obvious when you're talking about games that have like very well-defined rules, like PvP in Guild Wars 2. If you just don't go on the points the entire game, you're going to lose. You won't win the game that way. It doesn't matter what you think. The game has said these are the rules. If you don't abide by the rules, then that isn't the game's problem or your opponent's problem. You're just going to lose. But yeah, slight tangent there. I kind of wanted to redirect it.
I feel like the whole
I wanted to redirect it a little bit to solutions, because people are asking about solutions in the chat, and
lots of solutions.
In my opinion, the solution is the community. I had a great tea time. Okay, me selling out here a little bit, guys. Go watch my podcast.
Tea time.
Best podcast ever.
Coffee's better than tea, guys. Coffee's better than tea.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, now, wow, yeah, now we're really let's start these debates here now. But when I was talking with Helseth and Rom, and they brought up the Smash community, right, as a community that has like carried the game really hard. I think that the Guild Wars 2 community needs to do the same. I think it has to be from us. I think if ArenaNet is trying to keep up with their own game and teach players every little aspect of it, every little detail of it, I don't think that's even efficient. I think that's a fool's errand. I think you're going to be chasing your tail. What needs to happen is the community needs to really band together and try and help players understand the game as best as we possibly can. I think the YouTube scene is really lacking in this. I think Twitch is better actually than YouTube, but YouTube just doesn't have enough like fundamental basic mechanics guides about the game. Build guides, there aren't enough of those really, particularly for competitive game modes. They just don't really exist. Explaining how conquest works in PvP, explaining how world versus world works, these things just don't exist, and making them exist is the way to actually deal with this. And then on ArenaNet's end, I would say that just pushing social stuff way harder will be the solution to this. Getting players to talk to each other and getting players to communicate is how you address this. So making guilds more important, making guilds pushed upon the player a little bit more, and ooh, look, guild, join. So better ways to advertise, better way to join, better way to see what's going on there, more communication, more integration with stuff like Twitch, YouTube, and Discord in the game itself, and having that a part of the game's lifeblood. I think that is how you fix this, because I don't think you can really do it in game in a way that players aren't going to completely ignore and disregard. That's it, right?
But don't you think that there's already?
Hey, I'm taking over.
No, you're fine. Don't you think that there's already like quite a bit on the community though, that ArenaNet, like regardless of them focusing on their game and trying to get caught up and provide things for people, like there are a lot of people that say that it's on the community to do much more than it should be for certain things. Like how do you feel about that, especially compared to having us be the answer to fixing any of the problems that we are complaining or debating or discussing very nicely about?
I I think this is a very nuanced issue because if you think about it, content creators are basically the salespeople for the game. They're advertising it constantly. They're pitching why people should play it on YouTube or on Twitch or whatever. So in a sense, the community has a great responsibility for the retention and promotion of the game. The community has a massive part in this, and therefore the community also has a massive part in educating people about the game, because it's not like the game is like, it's not like ArenaNet's going to go and hire somebody and be like, okay, well, your entire job is to make guides for the game. Very unlikely, right? Where I'm going with this is that it puts a lot of pressure on the community, though. There's a lot of pressure on the community to do a lot of different things to make the game what it is. And it's very hard to get people to consistently do that. And I think we're very lucky that the Guild Wars 2 community is so passionate, because we have people that literally, we have guilds on NA that are dedicated to just killing Triple Trouble every day, just killing tech every day, and teaching people about these meta events and like creating some camaraderie and community around that. We have content creators that do nothing but make guides or create events or just try to get people hyped about different parts of the game.
Oh yeah, no, I think
I would tend to say that it is a lot, like it becomes a lot of pressure on the community, especially when it comes to, for content creators, promotion of the game. I think promoting the game and selling the game, it's a lot of pressure that's just on content creators. I think, and then the education bit, I think there's a lot of onus on the content creators or just on the community in general to go, like, a sentiment I hear a lot is, oh man, all these people that do raids, they just need to play with people that, have never done raids before. Or they just need to do this, or they need to do more to help. And whenever somebody says they need to do more for help, I go, Snowcross has an entire website full of builds, full of new player guides, links to community resources. What more would you have them do? And it usually stuns people. They don't really have a response, right? What more do you think the raid community can do to help people get into raids? And usually the people are just flustered and they just don't have an answer, right? Because the community is actually doing quite a bit. It's that within the game, it's hard to find those resources, right? Mm-hmm. So people often don't know that these things even exist, but there's still all this pressure on the community that they like have to do more. It's very confusing, right? Like people are actually doing quite a lot. It's that the visibility of that within the game is non-existent. And so people don't perceive people to be doing enough, even though they're doing a ton, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's no alternative. There
is. Like there's something that could be done, and it's closing the gap between ArenaNet and these communities that exist to help people within the game, right?
That's a big take.
So the way that you do that is you either you like essentially sponsor their Discord and be like, hey, now this to be very careful here. This would require a lot of work and a lot of collaboration, because ArenaNet also has a brand for their game, and some of these communities may not necessarily align exactly with that. So there would have to be a lot of consultation with this and being like, okay, if we promote your Discord in the LFG, for example, to train people in raids and to group up with people, how are you going to ensure that our values are not compromised in this? What's your moderation team? Like these are big discussions that would have to be had. But because none of these communities are accessible within the game in any fashion, it makes it seem like a player is being dumped on a deserted island all alone. And then when they do discover, they hear about little bits and things, they're like, oh, there is this raid community. Well, they're not doing anything to help me. They just don't know, right? They don't know how to access these resources very well. I feel like I feel like there's more that could be done. Sure that they sometimes promote like a content creator's video or something in the launcher. How many people just click the launcher through though, right? Like I don't think people really pay a ton of attention. It's about awareness maybe. I think the social media stuff is pretty good where they like promote somebody every once in a while. What my suggestion though is to instill these resources that the content creators are creating within the game somehow. Now that's like a pretty big leap. I understand that. But people are already doing it, and there's people being left out because they just don't know things exist. So why aren't we promoting Raid Academy in the LFG on NA? I see people constantly go into the aerodrome and go, will anybody train me? Will anybody help me? And it's crickets, right? You've now lost that.
They're like begging, they're just begging for help in the aerodrome. Please help.
This happens all the time, right?
No,
like,
but it's like,
somebody will go in and be like, how do I do this?
Right. But what I'm saying is, like, especially with being like, you know, it starts with the community. Absolutely. Like, there should be, you know, a good mindset. There should be helpful people. There should be people that do, you know, this, that, and the other thing. But it's also like, okay, like, regardless of builds, we're not even talking about, like, it was just an example, chat. But there's just a lot that's asked of the community. Not even content creators, just the community in general. And so it's just like, do you feel like it's a big ask? Like, and that's why I asked the question. And I think you really summed it up nicely, especially for content creators, honestly.
Yeah, it's a huge ask.
It is a huge ask, but it can also be done. I think the Smash example, I'm latching onto that one. Like Nintendo, like, hates the Smash Melee scene. Like, it's not even a meme. They are, if they could, they would kill it.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, like, you know, and look, Arena actually quite likes us, or at least some of us. Not Sneb, he's not worthy, but you know, at least a few of us, you know, actually like us. Like, so we're at an advantage here. I agree it's going to be very, very difficult, but yeah, I think you're right. There are loads of things we can do. Advertise in open world. Go and hang out with new players in Queensdale and say, hey, you know, like, you know, hop on board. We'll teach you about the game. You know, be in the LFG advertising your guild or your statics on NA. Like, you know, get someone who's just, you know, at work, AFKing there, and have an LFG with a Discord link and a little advert there. Look, raid sellers do this already. The people who actually, you know, look, if they can be bothered, we can be bothered, right? Go in map chat, go to Hard the Mist, right? Do all this stuff, you know?
But this just goes back to what Xandrii said. Do you know why I haven't done that?
Why?
I can't handle it. The number of people that fill out the form and like want to get into a group and then are constantly messaging me about getting into a group and organizing all of that, it's a ton of work. I was doing it alone for a long time. It actually got so overwhelming. I had to like put my hands up in the air and be like, I need help or I can't do this. And I'm lucky that I had mods that were like, we'll help you. And now I have like 8 or 9 people that are all watching this forum and trying to integrate people in. But we still, like, these are people that are just volunteering their time. At some point, it's a lot of pressure to put on people, right? And if you're just a volunteer, you're just having a good time doing this, it's just a lot, right? And I think it's important what Xandrii said, right? Is it a lot of pressure on content creators? I wish that there was more collaboration or something, though. I don't really have a super good answer for this, but like, I'm not advertising in the aerodrome really, or I'm not advertising in LFG because I can't scale that very well. I'm one guy who does this for fun, right? Like, it's a lot of pressure. We would need a much greater system, right? It's a lot.
Well, okay, I'm just spitballing here, but what if we actually created some kind of organization where a lot of people would work together, and we would do all of these things in one place, right?
They are, right? It's still a lot of work. That's my point.
It is. The thing is, yeah, this is why you have to think about scalability, right? You do have to work together. Yeah, like, one person can't do it. Like, one person literally cannot do it. It doesn't matter what an individual does. It's never going to be enough. You need to have hundreds of people doing this. There need to be clones of you, like loads of Snebs running around the place, going berserk, all doing the same thing as you. Yes, it has to be more. It has to be as organized as possible. It does have to be disturbingly formal and disturbingly real. And it has to be.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting at. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just like, man, that's a lot. Like, how do you guys feel about it? Which is great. And it's even like when I started playing Guild Wars 2 and I started doing these podcasts, I literally had people go, "You're doing so much to help out for, you know, the community for the word." And I'm just like, I am? Because I'm literally just having a good time, like, talking about all of these things. Like, I didn't even realize that's what I was doing, but cool, I'm helping out. But no, absolutely, there's a lot to it. So that's why I was wondering how you guys felt about it.
Yeah, it's tricky, and just so that people don't take this the wrong way. Like I love doing what I'm doing. I think it's super fun, right?
That's not what it sounded like.
But
Yeah.
no, I
Just
love
kidding.
it, right? I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it, right? I love the
For the money.
community. But there are times when I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm actually losing sleep. Like I'm a little bit stressed because I'm trying to manage all of this and I want it to succeed. And sometimes you have to take a step back and be like, this is a lot of pressure, right? Maybe I ought to relax a little bit, take it a little bit slower. Like when I first started the whole static thing that I'm doing, it was just an idea and I thought it might be kind of fun, and it grew so fast that I couldn't handle it, right? Like so that's what I was referencing.
So speaking of which, I have kept you guys for almost 3 hours. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize it. So do you guys have other than like the super secret things that you were talking about, anything exciting that you're excited for End of Dragons for when it drops, or like any event that you're really excited about that you can talk about? I know we covered it a little in the beginning, but anything to have people look forward to, specifically because we're talking about getting the word out for the community.
I'll tell you what I'm most excited for. I'm excited for essentially the rebrand of raids, because to me that's what the strike CMs are basically are. I'm excited to see what they've got. I have a lot of faith in ArenaNet. That doesn't mean I'm not a little bit skeptical, as we discussed before, or I'm not a little bit worried or anxious about it, but also cautiously optimistic and excited. I'm the full roller coaster of emotions, but that to me is key. What will define EOD's success to a player that is gameplay focused is how good strike CMs are. So that's perhaps what I'm most looking forward to EOD. And I'm super looking forward to launch day, because if I can swing it and my work will still allow me, I will take off at least one day and just become a kid again and game for like 14 hours a day until I can't anymore, right? I'm going to go hard, right? I'm going to go hard at EOD and have a super fun time streaming it. And that'll all be in my new gaming room, which is going to be sick.
Oh,
so,
snap.
Very exciting.
And what about you, Teapot? You got anything else planned, or any like cool events for streaming for EOD, or anything that you're going to implement for the community that you can actually talk about?
So I'm really excited about all the things I'm going to do with Hardstuck. Obviously, I think it's a good idea. I kind of alluded to it earlier that I think it's a good idea, but we've got a new website coming. The first one was scuffed. Okay, we just deleted it. We're bringing a new one out. Let's go.
Well,
and
it's so good.
I'm really looking forward to running a bunch of tournaments, right? Like, I really want to capitalize on the launch of the game and run an event for basically every game mode. It's going to be, I'll be bald by the end of that, pulled all my hair out. I want to do the same thing again when Steam comes out. I'm just excited to have the opportunity to watch Guild Wars 2 kind of re-earn the trust. I really have a lot of hope for the way the game is going right now. And the new leadership with Grouch, Colin, and JT is really cool. I think I really resonate with a lot of their ideas about strike missions, right? About alliances, about DirectX 11, communication. I'm really loving to see that. And I'm really starting to see some great success with improving our organization, and I'm starting to see a lot more events and daily activities happening within my own community, and I cannot wait to actually really ramp that up into End of Dragons and see if we can really capitalize on that and hopefully deliver on a few of the things that I've claimed to try and do. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. This is going to be a really big year. Even if things don't go totally to plan with the game, I am feeling very confident that we can make a really big difference, a big dent in some of the problems in the community that we've been discussing today, using the power of friendship and Hardstuck. Nice.
I'm actually, I'm excited to see if I will be there, because be ready for launch, because I'm very excited about going back and re-exploring and just having all of that love for the game and the little nuances that I might have skipped over previously. And so I'm like, I don't even know if I'll make it. I might not make it on launch day, but definitely after that. And I think one of the big things, especially the community, that I'm really excited about is capturing the new guild hall. I think I'm really excited about that, especially for people that have never captured a guild hall before. I think that'll be a really cool thing for all of us to hang out in Discord, capture the guild hall, hang out and explore together, check out and see if, they do actually add difficulty for open world in Cantha. And I was going to wait to talk about this until I had like a full like logo banner thing set up, but I am going to be hosting an event. So it'll be starting after the release date of the release date to build up hype for End of Dragons. And so there's like Nuzlocke for Pokemon, right? And then you have like Iron Mans for World of Warcraft, and I have my own Iron Man for Guild Wars 2 that I want to do that I'll actually be implementing rules for if anyone wants to participate. There will be more details to follow, but I'm excited. So we're probably going to do some items to give away, like big items, maybe like a mouse even or something, like a gaming mouse, and also some other things that I'm really excited about. So it'll be like, I'm hoping to post all of it online for the rules, and then hopefully people can take screenshots and everything, and whoever does it first or gets the furthest will get a certain amount of stuff.
Level wherever you want.
But it's going to be, for the most part, you have to use white gear that you get in the beginning, and you cannot die. If you die, you have to delete your character. So you'll have to show like different, you have to get to 80, complete the base game, and every like story mode or something. It's not completely done yet. It's definitely in the works. I'll be announcing it this weekend fully, probably on Sunday.
Wait, there's prizes for this?
There's
like,
prizes
like
for it. Yeah.
Whoever gets to 80 first?
Yep. Either that or whoever gets the furthest within the time limit. And you'll have to do you'll have to show us your API stuff to make sure that you didn't swap gear sets. You'll have to do like slash deaths for different parts of the story. And then at the end, the full thing, like slash deaths and taking screenshots to show that you've hit 80, you've completed the story and done that content. So it doesn't have to be anything after that. It's just hitting 80 and completing the base story, all white gear, no deaths, no groups, nothing like that. Obviously, you could like sit around and wait for people to kill something for an event and then do it or get the experience. But yeah.
This is very interesting. I'm already strategizing. I like it.
So I'm excited. It sounds like well, it's not. It's just like you can. We're trying to figure out if we'll have the down state. It'll just be no deaths. But no, I'm just saying that people have to implement their API. But we want to try to make sure that you don't swap gear. Obviously, a lot is going to be on the honor system. But what we would like are screenshots, the API, and things like that. Yeah, or if you're streaming, or if there's a VOD. But you know what I mean. It's supposed to be hard.
I'll figure it out. It sounds
and it's not like class locked or anything. So like even if you decide to, like bum rush it to 80, like, and you have enough hero points for an elite, go back and do the rest of the story, It's not for me. It's for the community. It was supposed to be something fun that people would be excited about.
I mean, you gotta try.
No, I can do it. I'm getting picked on that I won't get there because I read everything. I'll probably be in last place. I'll definitely do it. I don't know what I want to do it on.
Just imagine Xandrii like reading some text and like some obscure like band of pocket raptors just like annihilates her at level 55. I don't know.
But yeah, so I'm really excited. I'll probably have all of the info for that and all of the graphics to start promoting it by tomorrow. So